NAD, this is a question that's been arising in the consumer field for quite a while now. It's become more mainstream too over the last few years. NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is a molecule that's found in the cell, and moving forward, we'll simply say NAD, that's a mouthful. That molecule is responsible for two primary functions in the body. One is ATP production, so whenever you eat food, your body turns that into energy that all your cells need, all your organs need, all your tissues need. That's one of the primary functions of NAD. The other function is for cellular defense and repair. What does that mean? Basically, if you have any kind of damage, those damage comes from metabolic stressors such as sun exposure. It's super hot here right now. That, especially sun exposure to the point of sunburn, that causes inflammation. And NAD is necessary to repair that cellular damage that happens. Other types of metabolic stressors that we're experiencing a lot here is overconsumption of alcohol, high fat, high sugar diets, all of the fun stuff that goes along. All of that causes damage. So with NAD, when we get older and as we have consistent exposure to those metabolic stressors, you have a natural decline in NAD. The more it declines, then the cellular function is not as optimal as what it should be when we're younger. So by replacing it, whether through supplementation with an NAD precursor, there's IVs now, we'll talk a little bit about that later, there's shots as well, you can help to optimize the cellular function and maintain health and health span throughout your years. So it's adding quality to your years versus length to your life. Longevity is a word that happens quite often where people are wanting to add life and add years, but if those years aren't full of health quality, then in my opinion, what's the point? The key distinction between all the acronyms that we're seeing, whether online and social, NR, NMN, NAD, IVs, shots, etc., is basically the molecule. So for instance, NR, nicotinamide riboside, it's a unique form of vitamin B3, and it's known as a precursor to NAD. Precursors are building blocks, very similar to amino acids being a building block for protein. So nicotinamide riboside, a form of vitamin B3, building block to NAD. When you supplement with it, it helps your body create NAD on its own. And as I mentioned earlier, because of the natural decline we get with age and with exposure to metabolic stressors, then that kind of supports your body and supports that cellular function so that your body can create it on its own. Now, to make the distinction between NMN and NAD, because many people ask, well, why not just supplement with NAD directly? Well, there's a problem with that because it's a very large molecule, molecularly speaking. It has two phosphates on it, and phosphates cannot cross the cell membrane. So those have to be removed. Your body will break down NAD into its different components, one of which is NR. Another one is adenosine. Some people might hear about that when it comes to caffeine. Once the body breaks it down, then it crosses the cell membrane. So it's not very efficient to supplement directly with NAD. The same thing with NMN. Also a precursor to NAD, but it does have a phosphate on it. And again, that phosphate can't cross the cell membrane, so the body removes it. Once it removes that phosphate from NMN, it's actually NR. And then that NR crosses the cell membrane. There's other forms of different NAD precursors, like different forms of vitamin B3. We've all heard of niacin, also known as nicotinic acid. People can try to supplement with that, but it causes a flushing effect in really high doses. So you can't get up to the dose that's more efficacious to increase NAD because of that flushing effect. The form matters because of the efficiency of how well it can effectively increase NAD in the cell. Nicotinamide riboside is a two-step process. As I mentioned earlier, when it crosses the cell membrane directly, once it's inside the cell, it's two simple steps of enzymatic processes that converts it into NAD. As I mentioned earlier, like the NMN as well as NAD, they have to be broken apart before they can cross the cell membrane. And the other aspect is about quality when it comes to the quality of the ingredient or the supplement that you're taking, or even if it's an IV form. So Niagen, which is a patented form of nicotinamide riboside, it's nicotinamide riboside chloride actually, that has been extensively studied in over 45 human clinical trials, over 200 preclinical trials. Safety, quality, there's 19 different tests on quality to measure for potency, purity, and safety. So that matters. Some of the other tests out there, some of the other supplements out there, well, the supplement category in general is safe. There's just some companies out there that don't do the quality testing that everybody looks for, especially what we do here at Niagen Bioscience, where we test, as I mentioned, 19 tests. The NAD, there's a lot of NAD in the pharma space, in the IV space, in the wellness infusion space. There was a warning letter or a reminder letter from the FDA a couple years ago stating not to use food grade NAD because it was a supplement form that was being put into IVs, which can cause severe bacterial infections, and they found endotoxin, etc. So know the company. If you have any questions about that, make sure you just call the company and ask them, what do you do for quality testing, etc. So it's really easy. A lot of consumers aren't very courageous, I guess, when it comes to calling a company, but call the company. They'll answer all your questions. When it comes to being the most clinically studied NAD precursor, everybody wants quality, and they want scientific research underpinning the supplement brand. And that's what Niagen Bioscience offers. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 45 different human clinical studies on Niagen and over 200 preclinical studies. Those preclinical studies are done on rodents, or they're done in cells, in cell dishes, etc. So that data alone supports the efficacy as well as the quality, potency, and purity behind Niagen and behind True Niagen, nicotinamide riboside. I think consumers are becoming more savvy these days with trying to understand, is this really supported by science, or is it borrowed science? Because there are some companies out there that will borrow the science from a different brand per se and say that it also is supporting their brand. And that's on vitamin D, yeah, you can do that. But when it comes to really novel ingredients, such as nicotinamide riboside chloride, True Niagen, you have to have your own research, and we have that. We don't borrow research, we do the research. The way consumers can make the distinction between what is marketing hype and what is actually founded on science is to, one, look at what is the claim? Is there a clickbait claim? Is it a little bit of fear mongering? Things like, if you don't do this, then your life isn't going to be as great as what it should be. Those types of claims are definitely marketing hype. Those are clickbait claims to try to draw people in. The claims that are supported by science are always reflected by scientific studies showing that. So if you go online and you go to somebody's website, they should have their scientific research on the website. Other ways are just looking at the way the language of the claim is written, supporting a function such as supporting muscle health. Those types of claims written by that, and they're saying they're supporting, those are also claims that are more likely supported by science versus something to the effect of, you're going to get stronger in 10 days. That's clickbait headline. It draws everybody in, though, because we all want it. Scientists are thinking about longevity quite differently now. Again, consumers might be thinking about it as, I want to live longer, over 100, etc. But if you don't have health in those years that you've perhaps extended, then the length of time isn't necessarily the best of times. So what scientists are looking at now is actually what is termed health span. It's been kind of a term that's been in the scientific community for quite a while, is how do you add quality to years? You do that by looking at cellular performance and cellular function. Most people, I'm a dietitian, we always thought about food way back when I became a dietitian. We talk about eat healthy so that you can support different functions within the body. Now we're understanding that lifestyle of eating healthy and exercising is yes, it's supporting the organs and the tissues and muscles, etc., but it's also going to the cellular level. And that's what we mean by cellular health and cellular nutrition, in a sense. If you can support the functions of the cell, and there are infinite number of functions that we don't even know yet, then you can optimize the functions of all the cells in the body, trillions and trillions of cells in the body. If you can optimize the cellular function, then you can add that health to years so that you can increase and support health span and have a quality of life. It's all about quality, not necessary quantity. When people are looking at quality, not only for their own health, we always want to be able to run out and play. Like if you have grandkids, you want to run out and play with your grandkids. That's considered quality in health and quality of life. When it comes to choosing a supplement, you want to look for third-party testing. Again, it may not be on the label. Some of it will be, but some people may not know what those icons are, such as like halal and kosher. Those are some different third-party companies, but there's also other ones such as NSF. And those different types of seals that you might see on a product show that there's been third-party testing. If a product doesn't have that on there, it doesn't mean they haven't been third-party tested. That's where you can either go online and you can look, or you can call the company. And at Niagen, we do 19 different third-party testing to to make sure that our product is high quality, high potency, purity, and free of any kind of contaminants. The other part about quality is when it comes to the pharma grade, as I mentioned a little bit before. So Niagen Plus is our pharma grade, and that's what we deliver via IV or injection. That is 99.99% pure nicotinamide riboside chloride. Whereas I mentioned a little bit earlier, a while back, the FDA put a reminder letter out there to make sure that anybody who's doing NAD IVs or are doing pharma grade and not food grade. There's a difference. And the pharma grade is the one that could be injected directly, obviously, via IV or injection. So ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the question of the supplement company or even of the clinic. If you happen to be getting an IV or an injection, make sure you ask the questions and even ask them for their certificate of analysis. One of the great things that you can find on TrueNiagen.com website is to look for their certificate of analysis and their transparency program. So you could trace your lot number on the bottom of the bottle, and you can put that in. You can get the certificate of analysis showing all the different tests that it's gone through. Another point to remember is that Niagen Bioscience does some independent testing of supplements that are on the market. And what we did when we did this analysis, we sent it out to a third-party lab. So it wasn't us doing the study. It was a third-party lab that was doing the study. And they looked at different NMN products that were sold either on the website or on different websites that are easily accessible. And they found that over 2/3 of those supplements did not meet the label claim that they were seeing with regard to dose on the label. So again, it's kind of like, well, what am I getting? And some of them even had zero. They didn't have anything at all. So you're getting basically a placebo when you're spending a whole lot of money for a supplement that is supposed to help support your health. So that's important that we do some of this testing. This goes to third party, and there are some other supplement companies out there that do analyze different products that are on the market. You can go to just again ask the website, or I'm sorry, ask the company if they do any kind of third-party testing. The biggest misconceptions about NAD plus supplements is that it will directly stay as NAD in the body, and it doesn't do that. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very large molecule, and it has to be broken down. It's broken down into several constituents, one of those being nicotinamide riboside that does cross the cell membrane directly. Some of the other misconceptions that people are saying is, again, they're going to live long, when they get this, whether it be an IV or they take these supplements. And there's no data to show, especially in humans, that's a very, very long study, a lifetime study, to see if you're actually going to live longer. So it's important to where the clickbait headlines come into play. It's important to make sure that you have a little bit of skepticism when you see something that's too good to be true, and make sure that you're doing your research. So call the company, see if they have research on their product on their website, so that you understand what exactly you're getting and what claims and what health is it going to support for you. Some of the biggest misconceptions that we hear about NAD plus supplements is that if you take NAD supplement as a supplement or even as the IV, it's going to directly increase NAD levels. And it doesn't happen. As I mentioned before, NAD has to be broken down, as well as NMN has to be broken down into different constituents. What we found through the research on over 45 different human studies that we have is that Niagen, nicotinamide riboside chloride, will increase NAD between 50 and 150%, depending on the dose that you're taking. So if you think it's easier to take NAD as a supplement or even get it via IV as a supplement to directly get that increase in NAD, it doesn't work that way. Our bodies are they're amazing, actually, the way that they work, and they have several different pathways. For NAD supplements, as well as NMN supplements, they have to be broken down, so it is not more efficient. The most efficient way is to take Niagen to increase NAD because it crosses the cell membrane directly. As a dietitian, we're always talking about food first, and I 100% agree with food first. Everybody should put all the things in place: eating well, exercising. And exercising does increase NAD, but there comes a point where your body cannot keep up with the demand. So consumption becomes higher than production. And when that happens, which typically starts to fall after age 30, then that's when supplementation is necessary or recommended, again, depending on lifestyle factors, in order to support that cellular function and optimize cellular function by increasing NAD. So a study that published a few months back about whole blood NAD not being a marker for aging or biological age, and it also said that whole blood NAD remains stable. And while they looked at about 300 different people in a few different studies, they didn't look at all the data. So there are other studies that show that blood NAD does fall with age. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not just time, i.e. age, that causes a decrease in NAD. It's time in addition to the metabolic stressors that everybody faces. Those stressors change. Some days, like if you just travel here to France, you're gonna have jet lag and all that kind of stuff. That's a high stressor on your body. The sun, the alcohol, all of those fun things that we're encountering and participating in are all gonna decrease NAD a little bit more than, say, we're at home and we're doing our regular day-to-day. What the study did not talk about, though, was tissue NAD, and it also didn't talk about the fact that blood NAD is a marker of exposure. I don't know anybody who wants to get a biopsy of tissues, especially muscle biopsies, which you can do, but they're very painful. But no one's going to get a biopsy of their liver or of their heart or of their brain. And those are also areas where NAD is very important. Blood NAD is a non-invasive way to measure the marker of exposure to NAD precursors such as Niagen. Sometimes it's either a venous blood draw or it's a finger stick, and that's how you can measure it. But the tissues is also where it needs to go, because every cell in the body needs NAD. So blood can distribute some of the NAD there, but blood also needs NAD to survive. Everything needs NAD to survive. If you don't have it, then ultimately the cells die. So that study, again, clickbaity headline, all the longevity scientists are saying that blood NAD is a marker of it's a marker of aging, et cetera, et cetera. And those authors suggested that it is not a marker of aging. The story was missing a lot of context, because it's a marker of exposure and it's one of several markers of aging. And as far as I know, there's no scientists out there who are studying longevity that are saying, oh, blood NAD is the only marker of aging. That is not true. There are multiple markers of aging. Yes, NAD is showing up, and you'll see some cosmetic products now that have NAD. And again, it's looking at where's the science on the skin health. Every single cell in the body has NAD. That includes your skin. And NAD can be depleted in your skin, especially with exposure to sun, to the point of sunburn. So when you're communicating those types of, how is it transferring over different categories? Again, it's looking at cellular health. Cellular health encompasses every single cell in the body. And for the skin, what we've recently done here at Niagen, we've got some studies, some preclinical studies, meaning in skin cells, that show that Niagen could be effective on skin. We're trying to do some more skin studies on there to really understand what's going on there. We recently launched a Niagen nanocloud, so that shows that it has been in a perception study. It showed some benefits to skin health with regard to the glow, for instance, as well as this texture and the hydration level of it. We need a lot of hydration out here too. So it's communicating the science without making outrageous claims that are not supported by that science. To build the trust with just consumers as well as healthcare professionals alike is to be underpinned by science, which is what Niagen does. We make sure that the science is front and center. So whenever I speak at any kind of conferences, I'm speaking about the science specifically and the results of the science of what that found. When you get that science out there all the time and you're seen in the spotlight with regard to you're always touting your science, and that begins to build trust and credibility, not only with consumers, but also with healthcare providers. It takes a while to be a trusted brand. But when you put your science out there front and center, that begins to build trust. If the brand is not showing all these clickbaity claims that you see a lot, or you have a lot of influencers that are making all these claims that are unfounded and, quite frankly, not approved by FTC, more than likely, that is a cause to question. But when you have KOLs out there and they're talking about the science first that's underpinning the product, that's how you build trust. Another way to make sure that the there's quality behind the product is specifically Niagen has an independent external research program where it provides placebo as well as material to any independent researcher who wants to do studies on nicotinamide riboside and NAD, and they want to do it without, they have their own funding. So we had this external research program that has multiple studies in there, which is 90% of it is independently funded. That is another way to underpin quality. The other aspect of that is normally those studies will mention that Niagen was the product and the brand of the nicotinamide riboside that was used in the study. So if you're questioning that, you can look at other studies that are out there and look at what brand was used in the research. Sometimes the researchers will put it in there, sometimes they won't. It just depends. And then again, call the company and find out where is their science. If they don't have any, or if they direct you to other people's science, that's the time for pause.
I've never done stand-up in my life, but I've been in so many comedies that somehow he must be a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, to me, comedy is a very serious thing. It's the most serious thing.
Even on your best days, I feel like you always have just even a pinky in the audience's experience. You have to be able to sort of like be in conversation with them.
Hello, bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à Cannes. My name is John, moderating our session with these incredibly accomplished professionals on stage. My prep calls with these folks really opened my eyes to many, many things. Today we're going to focus on the impact of AI for everything from media to measurement to creative. There's a lot of changes going on in the marketplace. We see consolidation either being forced or being rejected because we can do things faster. There are things that necessarily we don't want to see move so quickly. Like, we'd like to keep our jobs. We don't even know if they're at risk yet. I don't think that they are personally. And so we have folks on our panel who represent different parts of our business. And media is just one of them. But there's also marketing leaders here. There's agency leaders here. And I'm really interested to hear their feedback about where they see this going. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with you, please, James.
Hi, I'm James Stevens. I lead North America here at Monks. And yeah, I think we're supposed to tell a fun fact about ourselves.
If you have one, thank you.
Yes, I have the state trees of the 6 states I grew up in, I lived in over the course of my life. And I always say I'm the forest for the trees, so the collective experiences we have. So I'm really excited to talk with this accomplished panel today and learn more and become better for it.
All right, thanks. I have no tattoos, but my name is Eric Matisoff. I'm the global evangelist focused on everything Adobe at Adobe. You've probably seen all of our advertisements everywhere, so I decided instead of wearing Adobe brands, I've got my Adobe sneakers. And a fun fact that wouldn't be on my LinkedIn profile is I've been smacked in the butt by Shaquille O'Neal on stage in front of 15,000 people.
Nice. That is impressive.
You know those are Pumas, right?
Sure do.
So Jeff Jacobs, I'm a partner at McKinsey, the Chicago office. I lead our consumer marketing. So really looking forward to this. My fun fact is I used to be a homicide investigator long before I got into marketing.
Oh, wow.
I love that. That's really cool.
Very natural transition.
In Washington, D.C., not far from you.
Yeah, really cool. I'm Liz Basilar. I'm the global head of AI for Under Armour. Fun fact is that I accidentally signed up for 3 marathons this year, so I'm running 3 marathons. But what I didn't expect was to run 3 miles to this panel on these heels, which I just did.
Well, you don't look like you're in it, so thank you for being here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this first question. This will be for you, James. So as a role of an agency, you've been answering brands' questions about what's going on in the marketplace. You act as a consigliere to all these brands, and they want to know what's happening. And now here we have these answer engines in AI. how does that help you leverage your own IQ and what your role is in the market to helping the brands then further learn how AI can help them?
Yeah, I think our job has always been to be so the people answering the biggest questions the clients have, and depth of knowledge about those clients and ability to access that is obviously greater than ever before. I also think the expectations of the answers and the judgment on those answers is faster than before as well. And which partners to use, and does this work or does this not work? Is this driving the impact my business is expected to? Is just supposed to be instantaneous right now. So there's a real risk in that. But I think that's where we as agencies come in as the partners that have the breadth of knowledge across all the clients we work with and all the different partners we collaborate with, and understanding and being that kind of, I guess, trusted partner to sort of recommend and how you get through all this complexity, get to those answers fast, but with sort of thoughtfulness and not over-rushed mindset.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to find other things to talk about once everybody gets a chance. Yes, these first prompts, if you will. So at Adobe, you have many different pieces of the marketing kit helping brands around the world understand what their customer journeys are and how they're engaging with their products, et cetera, et cetera. And you've built some incredible UI. But now that we have these LLMs, is the UI going to go away? Or are they going to get access to the data that you're harnessing faster through LLMs? Or we're going to see the UI hold its place in front of our practitioners?
Yeah, so I love this question. I want to know where the designers in the room are. No designers? Okay, all right, we've got a couple. There we go. So I think all the designers would agree with me that the UI is not going away. I think the agentic functionality is going to be embedded and continuing to be more and more embedded into everything that we're doing digitally. I mean, so far we've talked about LinkedIn, we've talked about Under Armour. I don't see a world where the home page or the home interaction is just simply a prompt or asking a question, but instead the opportunity to sculpt the experience that the consumers are having on those digital experiences is too great to just leave it wide open for consumers to own every decision and every next step.
So do people need to be guided in what they should be prompting? And then it's a starting point?
Yeah, we're already seeing lots of different templatization, getting people farther along to a direction in which we as marketers and as advertisers are driving people. But I don't think that just a blank slate, we don't want every website in the world or every app or experience to just be a blank chat box. I think that sounds like a really boring world to me, and it's not one that I want to live in.
Can I actually build on that? Because I actually think it's not about prompting. It is about fundamentally rethinking marketing. It is about understanding what are the workflows, what are the skills, what are the tasks, how can AI help? Of course, the LLMs are going to play a critical role. Adobe, I mean, there's so many phenomenal technology companies out there. That's going to continue. The technology is well ahead of the marketers. So, yeah, I see a lot of lazy prompting, but I think that's the least of the concern as much as how are we upskilling people and actually fundamentally reimagining, rewiring what marketing is, understanding the tools to really drive the impact. But I think it's kind of much more even a people opportunity versus just the prompting.
Yeah, I mean, consumer experiences have already changed, right? We've seen just in the last year, the percentage of increase of visitors to retail sites in the US has increased by 4,700% just in the last year. But if you think about like the context of that, it's still a relatively small number if you compare that to display and search and email and all the other ways. But clearly it's on a trajectory. And what I find really interesting about that is 80% of the people that are using search or using Gemini, using Google, end up not clicking through because the AI written summaries are valuable enough for them 40% of the time. That's a really significant change in just behavior that we're seeing from consumers. And to your point, Jeff, like that means that we need to get out ahead of it and be a part of that conversation well before, that first prompt or that first request comes in, or the next one or the next one.
I feel like I want to jump in because I'm hearing just different themes, and I wanted to outline them to you all. The first theme that I'm hearing when you talked about the UX is about the changes that either is in the interface for the consumer or the interface for us. They are consuming these products and passing them on to you. I feel like right now there's a lot of hysteria, and it's the worst kind of hysteria. It's ignorant hysteria. It's people that when they say AI, they mean just Gen AI. People that when they meet me in a cocktail party and see that I've been doing AI for 12 years, they like, what do you mean you've been doing AI for 12 years? Dude, what the hell? You know, like this has been going on for a long time. There's 5 layers of AIs in the stack. There's all kinds of different AI in each of those 5 layers. So if you don't want to take the time to understand the minutiae of that, that's okay. But you need to understand that there's an outline of a world that is AI, that much more than what you see on the surface right now. And then there's the trends. You see the trends of, there's underneath that. When you look at content producers, right, the influencers, you have to be in a bunch of different platforms. It's not about consolidation of platform, it's actually fragmentation of platform. They need to be in a bunch of different places. The consumer is in a bunch of different places. The younger consumer now wants to go back to the physical. We all know that, we see that. And when you look at the younger consumer, the Gen Z, that consumer wants it even more. So there's a lot happening here that it's not this chat box. And what comes down to the second theme, the people or upskilling. Yeah, upskilling, prompting, sure. But the most important insight here is really this is a time, I see a lot of people here come this year talking about tools, talking about technology. I love it. I love tools and technology. That's my bread and butter. But what this is really is, it's not really IT. I don't even think this conversation belongs in IT, to be frank, even though I am under the IT. I think it's misplaced. I think this is a total digital transformation strategy, CEO level conversation. CEOs need to wake up to that. It's their problem. It's not the CTO problem. It's about looking at the entire organization, rethinking every aspect of it, how everything is done. And the last thing that I will say, think about departments. A lot of AI transformation that you want to roll out right now, it does not work with people in department boxes. You have to bring them together as teams with a unified goal. And that team goal, it's the team. And then you deploy across all of those people. It's the only way that works. We have to change the way we work.
I was going to ask about how you were managing the implementation, and you just touched on it there. But is the true north the customer, or is the true north the internal workflow improvements to understand the customer? If you have to start somewhere, what's the true north?
The true north is the company. It's what's the company strategy? What's the company goals? I know people like to ask, what's your AI strategy? What's the company strategy? My strategy is to enable that, right? And that's where people get lost.
Yeah, you touched on strategy before structure earlier.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, I mean, where I'd probably take it is highly likely that company strategy involves a core set of consumers, shareholders, stakeholders. So it's how are they going to drive value? And then the question becomes, what are we going to do internally? How do we actually leverage AI? What we're finding is, we've got some stats. 85% of marketers are like really excited about using AI. I don't even know who the 15% are who actually said no to that. But only 10% are getting the value because they're being told from above, from the board, from the CEO, hey, we've got to be doing AI. What are we actually doing on it? So they're starting to create pilots and stuff. And I think it goes back to this idea of like, where can we create value? What's the economic leverage point, which ties to, how the companies make money, and then reimagining each of the flows of that, and then how AI fits within that. But it becomes, to your point, much more of a people, and it is the CEO and the CFO and the CHRO. It is truly a leadership priority. It has to be a leadership priority. This is not something that the marketing department must be doing alone.
Can I quickly just add to his point? So what I said, of course, you obviously need an AI strategy, but it starts with you knowing that your place as an AI executive to be an enabler. And what I see creative teams getting lost and marketing teams getting lost is that, yeah, you're right, they being imposed to, they facing tools are imposed on them instead of the ones who have access to tools coming to them and asking their objectives. Is your objective is, for instance, to recruit a younger audience, right? So first you map what's the existing process that you're doing for that and how can I optimize the process. You put the tools on the table and then you decide, that's when the AI strategy hits in, what's build versus buy, right? And then as you do it with them, they become the managers of the AI that you are deploying. And it's not you heading AI, it's you enabling people to head their AI.
So James, how much of this work needs to be done by the brands who you help before you can start to be this answer engine, help give them guidance?
And something you said a moment ago about the notion of the team really spoke to me. And I guess the speed at which this is all operating, the degree to which media is transforming, the importance of creative in that process, the importance of understanding product and how you express all that, makes it such that integration is so vitally necessary. I would argue that the vast majority of our clients, and hopefully they don't take this personally, are tremendously siloed. I think we as an industry are tremendously siloed. I think that is a great risk to be able to actually work at the speed and work with the integrated perspective that's absolutely necessary. So yes, I would expect some point of view and a clear strategy on what the company hopes to accomplish and what their measure of success looks like. But I think that is our role fundamentally, is to help provide that integrated perspective that they might struggle for because of the amount of institutional change that requires, at least initially. We're moving fast, and we can help you move a little bit faster, hopefully based on how we're built for it.
Eric, the role of the data silos, obviously you provide a lot of services thereof. How do you help mitigate that change of we got to get access to the data, and can we now bring in your case, a lot of marketing MarTech data, and then we have this ad tech world that's over here. Do you see these two worlds colliding more and more, or siloed?
So what's fun about our relationship is it goes back, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, thankfully before we're in this heat here in Cannes, in that we're working together on some new opportunities to bring the ad form world into the Adobe world. So looking for opportunities to bridge that gap between ad tech and MarTech in a way that is almost reminiscent of the days of third-party cookies. And it's not quite the same, it's definitely different, but I think those barriers are finding new ways to be broken down, and it's kind of a fun new world to play around with. Okay, well, we've got all of this owned behavioral data, and finally in this other box, we've got our media data. Where can we see correlations, but instead the opportunity to actually tie it together using technologies like AdForm and Adobe and beyond has been really interesting for me as like a nerdy data guy. Because I think there's just so much opportunity to move a little bit faster, or maybe retarget a little bit faster, and then, to your point, James, maybe that gives you the opportunity to fail faster too. Okay, you know what? We have our strategy, we've got the technology. If we get the people involved, then we can start moving a little bit faster and learning faster as well.
Liz, what is the category that you think is doing really well, and then how does your category fit into that? Or do you feel like you're bringing the leadership?
Listen, if you watch industry analysts talking about AI adoption and digital transformation company-wide, you will know that retail is at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. So it's as bad as it can be. We blame legacy systems, we blame fixed mindsets that we find in retail, right? Even within retail, there's a difference between apparel and beauty, right? I come from beauty. I was asked a lot before. And the notion of things changing and innovation and experimentation it's innate to that world of beauty and food, the food industry too. So above that, you find health, which has been fascinating. I tend to attend a lot of health events. It's a point of inspiration for me, an easy one for you all to connect to. When you do imaging now, like your CAT scans, your MRIs, those companies, they're rolling that out to you. They perfected it now. Before they were thinking about using just AI reading, and then they figured out that to get that very, very high accuracy, they do AI with human in the loop. It's super, super cool that you have the technician using AI and rolling that out for you. I had false positive cancer results every year in my screening. And when they start rolling AI, now I have accurate results. It's like fascinating how to see the advance of that. The top of the top is finance. You see the sector of finance. Regulation leads them, pushes them to be top because they have to go forward. They cannot share a lot of the data. They deal, PII is like pretty much the crux of what they handle. So they have to develop their own systems, right? A retailer should not develop their own LLM, but a bank should. And the health industry, they should, so they can keep data secure. When an enterprise AI company when you talk about either Anthropic or OpenAI, they tell you we don't train in your data. I think that's cool, but you can't really trust it. Not if you are a bank or if you are a healthcare company. So you have to really build internal teams, build internal capabilities, and all of that. One thing that I wanted to say that's interesting that I'm watching right now, that's kind of a sidestepping from this question. Just like you were a detective, I was a journalist for 10 years. And media was king. When I feel like Forrest Gump, I feel so lucky. I met all these heroes. I was on the right places. I saw these wonderful things, historic things. And then the industry collapsed. That's why I left, right? I felt like I was on the Titanic, and I left crying because I don't think it should have happened. It was lack of innovation, it was lack of digital transformation. It was a disaster. And right now, what we are seeing is something very interesting. We wish this industry was still strong because with paid search being thrown out, like in a confused state, earned media is back in the limelight. So if we look at how these engines work, they feed off of earned media. If earned media is broken, what the hell are we going to do to create context for consumers and brands?
And I think that's such an important point. Because even at some of the work that we do, we're like, okay, how do we continue to optimize paid? But now, far more of our conversations are about peso, paid, earned, shared, and owned. And this whole idea of like, okay, what is owned? What's it mean? How do you measure it? And someone had asked me earlier during the week, I'd say actually, of course, every conversation is talking about AI, but I'd say if you look around, 80% of the topics are AI, and I'd say, almost 20% are creator economy, earned, and I know that's at 100, but the point whatever is everything else. And I think those are like two of the biggest things in terms of how you get to discoverability, how you build brands, and there's still a lot of control, but right now I think a lot of the brand marketers are seeding that. But I feel like that combination of not just AI, but GEO, earned media is really a critical.
Just to build on that, we even see in the paid world the degree to which the quality of the content, the quality of the storytelling, relevance of that drives massive additional reach, in part because every platform we work with incentivizes to keep you on the platform. The greater quality we can deliver, whether that be in earned or paid or owned, the greater the experience for the consumer, and we all win in that regard, which is, I guess, if there's an optimistic statement to all of this, is, again, to the point we've all been making, technology behind us is still driving towards better consumer experience, faster learning, better understanding of our world, and better application of that for the brands that we all work on.
I think there's one interesting kind of wrinkle that's coming to the LLMs as they're starting to add advertising. Like if you look at ChatGPT and they're starting to incorporate advertising into the free tier, and I feel like that's less important than the GEO work because the people that have the free tiers are the least engaged ChatGPT users. So like, sure, we're getting some value out of there and you're getting some brand and some listings, but the GEO is so much more valuable because the people that are in ChatGPT, the people that are in Gemini and Claude every single day, every single hour, your most engaged people, they're paying $20 a month or whatever that needs to be. And so it's really an interesting dichotomy between, we need to drive some awareness, but it's to the people that are not spending a lot of time in these LLMs in the first place.
I have a trivia for you guys. You ready?
Ooh.
What is the top 3 most AI used tools in the world right now?
Our phone.
You mean in terms of devices or tools?
Companies, if you
Claude,
think ChatGPT,
Amazon.
Claude.
Claude is number 1, I believe.
Okay, what's number 2?
Gemini?
Okay, what's number 3?
Assume OpenAI.
Okay, you guys are all wrong. So it goes like this. Isn't that crazy? The number 1 in the world is OpenAI. The number 2 in the world is DeepSeek. We can't forget China, guys. Come on. We're not the bigger place in the world. And number 3 is Canva.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I think there's something really incredible that's happening because we might think of Canva as a design tool, but now Canva is an end-to-end and expanding by the minute. And when you talked earlier about is AI replacing us, right? What I'm bringing up Canva because their positioning is very clear of being a tool in your hand and a tool to empower the creatives. Like in this moment, the creators are feeling a lot of fear. They are this place they run to feel that everything is going to be okay. So the answer to are you going to be replaced by AI or not, it's your problem, it's your decision. Because if you're going to take the time to understand how to use the hammer, how to use the tool, you're going to be fine. And if you misuse it too, by getting lazy and lowering the quality of your own work, by not really doing the thinking that you do today without those tools, then the demise will come to you. And someone that knows how to use these tools with quality, with taste, would take your place.
Yeah.
I think, oh, good.
No, please. I know we got this signal, and I have one more question for all of you that you've same question. And obviously, they're available for future conversations. You can see this could go on for a long time. So what was the one thing that you've all used AI for to make you better at your jobs?
I would say, in terms of the favorite part of this job is to be able to be collaborative and to be able to bounce things off. I've never yet been able to use a tool that I got quite the immediate feedback and the dialogue. That form of dialogue, I think, is so rich. So in terms of, I guess, immediate application, the ability to sort of co-write, co-collaborate in every act and every decision I've made has been pretty transformative.
So, as I mentioned, data nerdy guy. I wrote Adobe Analytics for Dummies. That's how analytically nerdy I am. So one of the things that I like to do is keep track of a couple of metrics that are available online. So these metrics, I don't have an API to. I only can open up a page and see them. And what I realized is there's no trending information. So I can't see how day over day, week over week, month over month things are going. So using Claude, I was able to design a Chrome extension that I click a button, it automatically scrapes it, sends it into a Google Sheet, and voila, I've got my trends. So then I said, okay, well, I'm going to take this one step further, because really all I did was use AI to build the extension. I wasn't actually doing any analysis or anything beyond that. And so now I've got an agent that just automatically does it for me every day at 9:30 in the morning when I first log onto my computer. So little things like that take you farther and a little step of the way closer.
Speed.
Yeah, speed and scale. Those are the things we're talking about with AI.
So literally, I learned this over the last 3 years, but I essentially built a second brain, because my first brain wasn't doing so well, but built a second brain leveraging Cursor. You pick the models, and then it gives me a dashboard. It gives me a dashboard of the conversations I've had. It goes through my email. It can tell me who I haven't followed up with. It gives me nudges. It can actually, would you like me to draft an email? It can actually help me, you've got a meeting coming up. Would you like to give talking points? Hey, I noticed certain things. So it actually has context, memory, and it also just continues to learn. And so that's been something, and I continue to build it out.
Your digital self. Your digital self has been born.
And that was hours. That wasn't like days and classes and stuff. And I feel like it makes me more relevant as I learn more about myself, but then also personally and professionally.
All right, Liz, bring us home.
It's very hard to pick one because I use it a lot. So at work, something that could be useful to you, one of the best starting points is making a list of what you hate to do and use it to bring you more joy, right? Simple examples. I hate taking notes. So how can I then tap into Voice or a Copilot, if you have a Copilot, or whatever tool that's available to you, to create a system to capture notes, summarizing, and taking takeaways and scheduling things that need to be scheduled. I hate putting appointments on my calendar. Everything that I do, like those things, I don't like doing them, so automating that. In my personal life, I hate creating the grocery shopping plan for the week. So what we did, using Claude, we created an agentic system with my kids and my husband. We sit every 2 weeks. The system already knows that my husband's lactose intolerant, I'm pescatarian, my daughter wants to be vegetarian. And then we create the menu for the week. It sends my husband to Costco because I'm not going to Costco. And sends my daughter to Trader Joe's, and I take care of the subscriptions of the family. So it creates more joy, right? And one last thing, something more serious. I created an app that analyzes my body data. So all my blood exams, everything that I do, I run through this app. That's my data that it's there. It's not shared. It doesn't go back to another model. And it signals to me when I'm sick before I know it. Trust me. Yes. He actually told me that I should look into premenopause last week.
Amazing.
And my doctor had no idea. And then my doctor looked into it and said, yeah, it's right. So it's incredible. If you know your body data, now we have the ability to do that because doctors are Gen AI. They are guessing mechanisms. You show up to them and say, I have a tummy ache. Well, you ate something or you have cancer. You know, like it's a huge, but if you have the minutia of your data incrementally, you're able to accurately know what's happening with you and empower people to take care of you well. And I think that's incredible.
Well, thank you all for your wisdom. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you get home safely wherever you're going, get a chance to meet these wonderful people. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John.
One of the other questions I always ask my team is, if our brand was a movie, would people watch it? If the answer is no, we need to go back to the drawing board, because there's something about cinema, there's something about a story.
The biggest consumer trend shift that I'm seeing as a result of AI is, I'm calling it the kind of birth of the AI native consumer. Consumers that are essentially used to using LLMs and as such conditioned by the idea that conversation and natural language is the way that any digital surface should work. And so if you go from having a 2-minute conversation with an LLM that helps you discover a product or learn something, you want to go to any other digital surface and have the same conversational, highly personalized and relevant conversation. The conversational web is a new category that we believe is imperative for the open web to survive. Let me tell you why. As we think about this AI native consumer that's really used to, conditioned really to use LLMs, conditioned by conversation, conditioned to expect instant relevance, the moment they end up on a website as part of their journey from, researching an LLM, validating the information on a website, they have this really jarring experience. We all have this jarring experience of recognizing that websites are pretty generic, pretty static and unintelligent. And in that surface, that is really the only surface that the brand has complete governance and control over, and an opportunity, because they've earned that attention, to really give that consumer exactly what that brand is about and persuade them to hopefully do business with them. What we're seeing across our data set is that 80%, over 80% really, of these AI native consumers that are coming from LLMs are bouncing off of these pages. So what that means is they arrive at the website from an LLM and they immediately decide to leave and never come back. And we think this is happening because websites are so static and generic. So what is the conversational web? The conversational web is a new era of websites. It's moving away from the idea of the website as a billboard, essentially, and into the world of the website actually being commanded through conversation and giving you something more than the LLM was able to give you. Because the LLM is giving you text. When you get to a website, you want to touch, you want to feel, you want to see, you want to hear. So this multimodal immersive experience for a human that you can command through conversation. So if you're searching for a car that doesn't look like a mom van, you can then arrive at the website and say, I'm searching for a car that doesn't look like a mom van. And the site would just respond dynamically with all the atoms of information that are relevant to your query, to your search in the way that you said it. Separately for agents, when agents arrive at the website, they're also looking for information that's personalized to what they're searching for, but the modality of content they prefer is code. So what we launched, ACE, is really a dual audience personalization engine that gives the human the immersive experience, the human first experience, and the agent, the code agent first experience. And whenever you come back to the page, it continues the conversation with you. So it recognizes that you came and left and came back, and as a result you want to be there to have that continuous relevant conversation. And there's no more pages, because one of the biggest issues with the websites today is that you have to go on the scavenger hunt to figure out, like, hopefully I'll find like how I should convert through this. And there's no more pages. The whole website comes to that one landing experience and reassembles itself dynamically for you at the point of your consumption. So it's really cool. So what we've seen so far with Google, who was the first customer for this and really inspired our build, What we've seen with them is that when you have this highly personalized, responsive experience, that 80% bounce rate goes down significantly. So for Google, we brought that down 20%. The engagement goes up significantly. So for Google, we went up to 5x in engagement. And then the conversion for all of our other clients who are focused on conversion went up 3x. And it's, they're crazy numbers in our world. No one really delivers quite to that level. But the reason we think it's possible, it's because websites are so difficult to use today that the bar's so low and the numbers are so bad that personalization really works, and when you bring the website into the present, because everything else we touch, whether it's social media or LLMs, are highly personalized, highly relevant to us, right? But when you bring the website into the present, then of course it becomes a more important part of that customer journey, and it actually gives the customer the value exchange that they're looking for. The reality is that everything's changed and nothing's changed. We've been marketing to machines for a long time, whether that's search engines or programmatic advertising. So the practice of GEO or AEO, which is marketing to LLM agents, feels new, it feels radical, and I think the headlines will have you think that this is it and there's nothing else. This is the only thing that matters in marketing. But the reality is, it's not really quite that new. In my mind, it's really just taking SEO a lot more seriously, like doing the things that you were meant to do to begin with. And I think there's actually a danger of overly listening to this type of guidance, because if you overly market only to agents, you really end up hurting the human experience. The other issue with websites is that they're these one-size-fit-all entities. And so a lot of these GEO platforms will come to marketers and say, to increase your LLM visibility, you need to create 100 product comparison pages and 20 blog posts about these, topics. And it all gets stuffed into the same website. And it's all this kind of page-based system. So when the human arrives to the website, they'll often land in the middle of this website because of one of these product comparison pages. And once they land there, they're like in the middle of this desert with no map. So what's really difficult about this paradigm is that by overly pursuing these agents over the last 12 months, I'd say, we've actually ended up hurting the human experience. And we've seen this across our customers because our core product really measures customer journeys and business outcomes for marketers. And we've seen that for our customers who went into Geo really early and optimized the heck out of it, they've ended up hurting their on-site conversion. So the human on-site conversion, which is ultimately the way you make money. So is visibility in LLMs important? 100%. Is visibility in LLMs equal to business outcomes today? No. In fact, it's a tiny percentage of traffic. We can't quite figure out how to correlate it to conversion. And I think that is where we need to focus our attention. So I've been telling everyone who listens that I think we need to enter the era of generative engine conversion and figure out how to build models, data science models, to really understand if someone sees you in an LLM and then they go to search or they go to social and then they end up on your site, are they more or less likely to convert? And how do you deal with that more fluid customer journey where the LLM is this new channel? So I think the big paradigm shift with ACE is that personalization is really put into the hands of the consumer. So the controls of how you want the experience to shape around you is being given to you, because the website basically says, what are you here for? What were you searching for? To date, websites, and I think personalization in general, has been really what the marketing team thought you might need based on what they thought they knew about you. So when you come to a website, usually it represents either the org chart of a company, because everyone gets involved in designing the website and like, we should put the products here and the brand names here. Or it represents what the marketing team thought this customer segment that they think you're in would want. With ACE, when you arrive to the site, you tell it what you want. So the website reassembles for you, not the website is pre-assembled for a version of you that the brand thinks you are. And I think there's amazing power in that, because if you can actually stay within the brand governance and the brand guidelines and give the person, the human, that type of agency, which they're now used to because of LLMs, I think there's this immediate value exchange between the audience and the brand that you can't, money can't buy. If you actually get what you want when you want it, it's a really, great experience as a consumer. I had the pleasure of attending this amazing program the weekend before Cannes. It's called the IRG program. And part of the program was this Gen Z panel. There were 8 Gen Z marketers, basically. And they came to talk to this group of CMOs about what they see the future looks like. One of the questions was, if a brand generates AI content, does it make you feel like it's less human, that it doesn't understand you? Like, how do you think about that? I thought the answer was really fascinating, and it influences my answer to this question. Their answer was, as long as the content is authentic to your brand, if your brand has earned the right to create just AI content, and as long as that feels authentic, then it would make us feel something for your brand. I thought it was really interesting, because I think we're maybe asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about, is it AI or is it not AI? Maybe it's about, have you earned the right to use AI? Does your brand values, do they align with using AI? And if so, can you do it in a way that can make people feel? The right metrics to track for marketing has been this fascinating, adventure that I've been on for 10 years. We really decided to start Notch here in Cannes 10 years ago. And I've been trying to find the right answer. And the answer is, it really depends. It depends on the brand. It depends on the access that brand has to first-party data. It depends on the goals of that brand, or the goals of that specific campaign, or the goals of that specific product. But I will say one thing that I think is really important. The biggest issue with marketing measurement, the biggest issue with really getting to real ROI is not the metrics, and it's not the measurement, because now all of that is possible. It didn't used to be. The biggest issue is the org chart of brands. The way marketing organizations are organized in teams internally makes it very difficult to really measure things right. There's a first touch team, which is like a search, organic team. There's a last touch team, which is more of a performance team. This team over here is bringing people into the funnel, or whatever you want to call it. This team over here is focused on last click attribution. So, can we get them to actually become customers? And there's this whole journey in the middle that all of us go through that no one is really focused on within these organizations. And that hasn't changed for the last few years. It's one of the biggest issues that we see across our clients, is that they have this big top of funnel and almost no one is actually converting. So my question to marketing teams is, how can you become more integrated? Because, the funnel obviously is the problem. We have a leaky funnel, but when you look at LLMs and the way they choose who to index in answers, it's the brands that have an omni-channel presence that's consistent. There is no way to really game LLMs with another 100 blog posts. I can tell you that. But what you can do is do great marketing that's integrated and really follows the customer journey. I don't know if I've seen large companies successfully embracing AI. This may be a hot take, because there's a beach full of CMOs saying that they've successfully embraced AI. But I would tell you, we work with these teams, and I think there's a disconnect sometimes between what the board thinks, what the C-levels think, and what's actually happening on the ground. So far, I would say most of our clients are in a pilot purgatory where they're trying out a lot of different things. I think we're just now starting to understand what's really working versus not at scale, but the dust still hasn't fully settled. I think there's a lot of questions around what functions of marketing may or may not still be around as a result of the type of AI that we now have available. So I think it'll take us another 2 years to really be able to say, this is exactly the role AI plays, these are exactly the agents we need, and this is who we're going to buy it from. My intuition tells me, I think it's going to be a lot of the frontier models. So the big companies that are building the frontier models, they have been pretty successful at driving utilization of some basic use cases. And then I think it's going to be a combination of specialized, expert-driven partners like us, or internal teams that decide to build on top of those models. For every CMO leaving Cannes, what I'd love for them to consider is that everything's changed and nothing's changed. We've been here, for multiple times so far in our history. Like every time there's been a massive tech trend, a massive tech shift, the change kind of happened faster and also slower than we expected. And it wasn't quite as drastic in some ways as we imagined it, and a lot more drastic in others. So what I mean by that in regards to AI is, I think AI is already playing a massive role. AI has fundamentally changed us as consumers. And as a result, the practice of marketing has to change. But AI is really just another channel. LLMs are just another channel. That's how I think of them. I don't think this idea of zero-click marketing, where the only thing we do is we're staring at an LLM and we allow it to make all of our choices. I don't think that is true. Just how, when social media came out and Facebook was the biggest thing ever, it was not true that all we needed was a Facebook page. I think human beings are yes and creatures. We adopt new trends very quickly and incorporate it into our lives. And I think as a result, marketing has to be a yes and. So has everything changed? Yes, it has, in the sense that there's this new channel that's really changing our assumptions around the customer journey. But nothing's changed in the sense that marketing has been multi-channel and will continue to be multi-channel.
I think the last few years have been, really just an education for people to understand, what are language models, what can you do with them, how do you prompt them, how can they help you be more efficient in your work. And I think that was kind of like the first wave of understanding. And a lot of people have hit barriers of what's possible. And I think one of the biggest ones has been kind of the bias around kind of what's inside of a language model. A lot of the work that we've been doing have been creating a new type of model called people models, which allow individuals, like team members, to essentially generate an audience or a population that you can collaborate with. And so a lot of the use cases early on were more of like talking to an agent, talking to a friend. It was a lot of positioning around how to make AI your friend or your collaborator, but it was really single dimensional. And so you always came out with kind of average responses. And so what we're doing and what we're seeing in the industry is that AI can also reflect all different types of lenses and ways that you see the world. And those are the really exciting, I think, kind of the next wave of AI is really looking at it to give you superpowers where you can actually like walk a mile in someone else's shoes and not just collaborate with an individual, but collaborate with the world. Language models that we use every day, like Gemini, GPT, Claude, are amazing models at helping you and I make things, right? So they're kind of used the scraped internet as training material to create kind of the language model. The next wave is really above that, which are these people models. And so rather than using the internet for its training material, we've been trying to interview the world over the last 5 years and doing it through video. And so we've launched video questions out to people, like millions of people all over the world, to share a little bit more about their identity, their lived experience, their desires. And so all of that information and these stories go into our people models. And you can kind of think of it as the world's largest kind of computational model of human behavior. So we don't focus on words or language, we focus on all the things that make us amazing, but also walking contradictions sometimes. And so using that model, you can generate an individual agent that could be your customer, customer representative. But rather than just talking to one person, we allow you to build populations of them. So just imagine, if you're like one of our customers is Unilever, they've implemented populations across all the different brands. And so rather than talking to like 5 personas, you could actually create millions of agents. It's almost like a sim city of your brand. And so then because all these agents are unique, they understand what they look like. They have lived experience. Their pet has a name. And so when you're sharing ideas with them, they can give feedback using the unique lens of who they are. And so we just think there's a really compelling, not just use case for people models or populations, but we really think it goes beyond just using AI as an answer machine or an answer engine. It's a way for us to actually collaborate with the world, because you can create populations of, like within healthcare, right? You can create populations of patients who live in different parts of the country who struggle with different things. We can also create agents that are healthcare practitioners who focus on oncology or dermatology. And you can actually have both of them work together to identify new ideas and innovation. And it becomes just this kind of living microsystem of insights and ideas. And so, you and I get to be the ones that get to orchestrate kind of these worlds that we're building, and it will move us beyond looking at AI as a tool that I prompt and more about a world that I can actually create. So we take the videos that we collect and we break them apart into image layers, audio layers, text, emotion, and that goes into the people model. And so when companies get started, they'll create their own world. Think of a world as like a workspace in a way. And then you can generate the different agents inside of it. And so you can build your own populations of, who your target audience is. And what's been fascinating is that, most of the brands, they have an idea of who their audience is. And so, they may give it to us as a starting point. And we said, well, what if you could actually expand your audience? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what if we just asked the population of the world around this like article you're writing or what you're talking about? And what if we give them the information and let them decide if they're interested in it? And so that's how we think you can actually find new audiences, is by putting information into this and let it, essentially the audience could raise their hand and say, I'm interested in these things. And the most important part is why. And so because these people models have lived experience, it goes back to how you and I are shaped through a whole life, and starts to peel apart some of the reasons why we're attracted or interested in these topics. And so it just becomes a really big learning journey for companies to understand that what you're working on has a bigger impact than you may imagine. In the real world, you'd have to put it out and then the audience finds it somehow. But what if you could actually test it before you launched it in the real world to find some new ways that you might articulate what you're working on? Yeah, there are many things that are broken with the traditional kind of market research industry. And I should know, I was in it for 25 years. A lot of the methods that teams have used to gain insight from people were based on human limitations. So if you're launching a survey or a poll, I can only, like as a human, I can only sit through maybe 20 questions, right, before I dip out. Or if I'm in a focus group, I'm kind of stuck in a room with 6 people that I have no context of why I'm even here. And so the idea with what we were doing was, rather than collect data that essentially is looking in the rear view of things that already happened, and in a room where you only have 6 to 8 people to talk to, what if you could make like the world's largest focus group, and rather than people getting influenced by one another, what if you could actually create a system where it expands the room, expands the amount of people you can talk to, and that you can actually share 2,000 ideas. And because it's AI, you don't have limitations on essentially the bias that's baked in, or a human can't remember 20,000 or 2,000 different ideas you shared with them. And so there's just limited possibilities for what this looks like. And I view it as like we're building the windshield. And so most of the research that's out there, I think it's like $153 billion a year spent on market research, is essentially looking at the rear view. It's things that have already happened. Well, what happens when you actually create the windshield and we look at the future? And so when you can share and do research that looks forward, we believe it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry over the next couple of years, and give rise to a new generation of market research that's much more predictive and generative. The most, I think, enlightening thing of this next stage of AI is going to be decision intelligence. So when you talk to any brands, they're really just looking for confidence in the speed at which they can make decisions. So should we partner with this creator? Should we launch this new product idea? Should we talk about it this way? All of those have been predicated on market research, again, that kind of lived in the past. When you're able to launch a new product idea to a population, you could have feedback from 20,000 within the you could have intelligence or insights around how 20,000 people understood what your idea is and if they think you should launch it. That can be done in seconds. And then you can start to interrogate, well, why? Why is this a good idea? What should we watch out for? And get responses back, again, in seconds. And this helps you and I as humans just feel confident in our ideas. So we use the word simulation, which sometimes feels like a sci-fi or scary word. But for the longest time, you and I have been trying to play out ideas in our head. We have tried to, create a PowerPoint deck of like, here's my idea, and kind of the visuals in a linear form. Or you're in the shower and you're trying to imagine like what tomorrow is going to look like when you walk into a meeting, or you are sharing, you're launching something new. Are people going to see it? And so people refresh and click to see how many clicks it happens. Simulation can actually be a way for you to live out these future scenarios. And so when you could test something, 2,000 different ways and see the future, it actually makes you feel much more confident and prepared for what you're about to do. And so we think kind of the advent of the next age of AI is going to be around decision intelligence. It's you having lived out all these different scenarios personally or in the business world, really give you confidence to take the next step. So when we started 5 years ago, our tagline was AI powered by people. And so we knew that our human judgment, our empathy is all core to who we are as people. And so rather than training off of the internet, which is just kind of biased in nature, it doesn't understand you and me. And so we build our AI powered by real people. And so every single day, every single minute of every single day, we are launching video questions to real people all over the world to power our models. And so one of the big questions we always get asked is around, how do you validate that what the populations are saying is true? And does it align with humans? And the beauty is that you can actually launch the same question to an AI population that you can launch to real people and actually compare and contrast the responses. And so it was very important for us to not build, a black box that you can't really understand what's happening. We want you to be able to, again, have confidence in the decisions you're making. What's been really compelling is that we'll create a population of like GLP-1 consumers. And then we have real GLP-1 consumers. And we'll ask them the same sets of questions. And what we started to find is that humans give us, like the first sets of answers that they have. When we went deep with AI populations, they gave us more. And so we took the ideas and the insights that the population gave us, went back to GLP-1 consumers and said, are these things true? And so we got validation on all of the new themes that were generated by the AI populations. And so we had to ask a question, well, why didn't you share these? And predominantly it was, I didn't want to talk about it. And so we think that, in the market research industry, there was a big gap around saying and doing. And so what we think in populations is that we can actually go below, kind of below the water line. It's all the things under the water that are usually the things that kill us, not the things on top of it. And so our ambition for this was to build, AI that is powered by you and I, that we all have an active role to play in it. It's not relegated to a few big tech companies that get to dictate kind of the AI that we get to use. We are amazing feeling machines. We have amazing insight, amazing ideas. We're unpredictable in many ways. And so when you can take the energy, the power, the ambition of humans and put that at the center of AI, it inherently becomes more human, and something I believe to be less scary, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to find the truth, the insight, so that we can create new ideas and move everyone forward. So within the next age of brand building, we'll focus on desire. And so when you look at how do you build a brand in like today and in the future, like we're here in Cannes, Unilever has been winning awards the last few years by focusing on desire. They're one of our customers. And so really what desire is all about is just trying to understand what our like individual goals are. And as a company, how can you help me achieve my goals? Some of these could be, I just want to feel good when I walk into a meeting, or I'm going on a date and I just want to feel a certain way. These are really important for you and I, just as we live in our everyday lives. And so when brands can kind of remove the cloud of what they're trying to do and really partner with people to understand what are you trying to achieve in your life? Out of that desire, you can create real innovation. And so it could be product ideas, but probably most of it's experiential. It's, just things that we get to go through that change who we are. And so one of the big things that you'll see, kind of playing out in the news are all the like job loss around AI, and AI is doing this and taking over jobs. There are some companies that are also looking at it as retraining people around building more like relationship skills, right? So where a company today has been, let's put all of our employees in a building, but what if you could leverage AI in a certain way where a piece of that, the people can actually be pushed towards the front of the consumer experience and actually understand and build relationships, with you and I. So desire is going to be the centerpiece of how you build brands, over the next few years. AI will be central to that, but it's really up to the brand to figure out what you and I desire, and then how they can play a big role in helping us get there. For brands to not rely exclusively on technology, you have to build experiences where you're interacting with your fans, your consumers, your creators, your community. And so I think we're starting to see that horseshoe where a part of the organization is investing heavy in AI. Again, going beyond language models to people models are vital to not just kind of hear one thing. The other side of it is to invest in being as close as possible to your consumer. And so that could look like doing pop-ups and events and experiences, or for brands to open retail stores that you would never think that they would have a retail store. Those two investments are going to be extremely important to build brands over the next few years. And so you can't rely on one side of that. So if you're just relying on AI, you're going to tip over. If you're just relying on people, you're going to tip over. And so you have to do both at the same time and build fans, build community, and do it in real life. Build people intelligence using AI at the same time. So by 2030, I think the relationship between brands and consumers will fundamentally change. I've always hated the word consumers because it really doesn't take into account my relationship with a brand. And we've always looked at brands as being where I get my products from. And so over the next few years, you'll start to see that relationship become much more around co-creation, where brands and people can actually build ideas together. Vaseline Verified and Vaseline Originals, is a real close partnership where, Unilever, our client, has created opportunities for everyone to become a creator. And so if you have interesting ideas or different ways that, our brand should show up, we not just want to hear about them, we want to create them with you. And so I think brands will maybe not stop completely being kind of manufacturers of products to ship to people, but actually become ways to actually create, almost like co-ideate, co-manufacture new concepts and ideas. Some could be products, but also some could be services and experiences that help, get after the things that we not only desire, but also the potential and what we want to do with our life. So it's going to be interesting of how quickly that changes, but I would love a future where we didn't have, brands and consumers, but everyone was literally a creator to create their future self. We've been on this journey over the last 10 years of brands investing in influencers and creators, and it started off more of a transactional relationship where it was more to promote a product. And what we've seen over the last 10 years is that has started to get closer and closer and closer and closer together. And I see that trend continuing. And so I think the brands that thrive in the future are the ones that create, kind of windows into that creative process so that consumers can stop just being consumers and can actually create with the brand. So it's going to create a new relationship in the future that's less about consumer and more about community. AI is more than language models. A lot of the discussion here has been about how you as an employee are using a language model to get an insight and idea. The next wave of AI, we believe, is going to be about people. And so all panels are talking about human, and we seem to be a company that's actually building models for humanity. And it's somewhat of a contrarian view in some ways, but I think we're in the right place, the right time where, we all want to build with one another. And so we want to create ways to do that. Yeah, so when we raised our Series A, actually at Cannes last year, Havas stepped in as a lead investor. And so over the last 6 months, we've been embedding Verve's platform and populations into a few of their customers. And it's gone wildly successful. And so when we announced our Series B, they stepped in and wanted to lead the round. So the last few days, we've been making the announcement that they're leading the investment in Series B and expanding what populations look like to all of their customers. And we've just seen such value in just embracing a different kind of AI and really what you can do with it. So creating populations of patients and healthcare practitioners, they don't just have to be a sounding board to test your ideas. They can actually work together and come up with new and amazing things. And we're just thankful to have them as not only an investor in it, but also to champion it with all of their clients.
One of the things that make Cannes special is that it serves two purposes at once. It's a retrospective, a chance to look back at the work that defined the past year and celebrate the ideas that move our industry forward. But it's also reset, a moment when we collectively start looking ahead and asking what kind of creativity will matter next. So today we're going to do both. We'll look at what stood out this year, what we learned from the work being celebrated, how Monk's own work fits into those shifts, and what it all means for the future of creativity. And along the way, we'll talk about the work we wish we'd done ourselves. So, guys, a quick round of presentations.
Hello, I'm Yuka. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Monks, and I'm with this beautiful team next to me.
Hey everybody, I'm Jen Goldberg. I head up the strategy team across North America for Monks.
And I'm Bernardo. I'm Chief Creative Officer for orchestration.
Thank you. An applause,
Thank you.
please. Yeah. Okay, starting with Yuka. I have you next to me, so
Easy.
let's start. Yeah. Cannes is often the best snapshot of what the industry has achieved over the previous 12 months. So looking across the work being celebrated this year so far, what stands out to you the most? And what themes, patterns, or signals you think are emerging?
It's an interesting question. Like, we were talking about it a lot. I feel that what's very prominent is that the work feels closer to consumers from the point of view of it's really built around the lives of consumers. It's been the protagonist of the campaign, where like we always come back originally from more brands in the center. It's now people in the center and stories built around them, which is actually quite like refreshing. But it also gets really close and genuine stories, and you see it in quite a lot of campaigns. I think the big ones, Vaseline is, I think, one of the most. At least I've heard that the most as one of the standouts. Kit Kat is an interesting one, which is less about like consumer in the center, but it really is coming from the consumers. It's been triggered about it, so it's sort of turning the table a lot, and it shows that I think that's the change of also marketing and brand relevance these days.
Yeah, I think with the proliferation of AI, as we've all been talking about for quite a bit this week, it sort of opens up this idea that you can make anything at any time. And so then the work that starts to stand out are things that feel the most personal, right? The closest, the deepest, the things that have the best insights that are most based off of the way that people actually interact with brands. I've been really inspired by a Canadian hearing aid company that repackaged one of their hearing aids as sex toys, basically, as relationship aids rather than hearing aids. And as someone who is dating a person who is challenged to hear sometimes, it is absolutely true. They found this great insight that your intimacy and your depth of relationship can be really, really hard when you can't hear each other. So it was just a really great way for them to just like deeply understand why people need these products in their lives and why they love these brands, and then dial that up.
Bernardo, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think the idea is they show technology as inevitable as part of how to make it, and not just an add-on or just for the show. If you couldn't make it today, an idea that you could have shown last year should not make today, and I think we're seeing a lot of that. Like some of the ones that are going forward, even like Juan Gabriel, the one from Netflix, from our team in Mexico, it's something that you couldn't have done before. It's still very close to consumers, but at the same time, like you're really connecting in a way that feels unique and new, and I think that's like what the judges were really looking for this year.
There's been a lot of I was going to say there's been a lot of conversation around sort of inevitable ideas being the things that really stand out this year, whether that's because the technology is finally caught up, because it feels so dead obvious and is so exciting when you see it. I think that's the work that I'm always the most inspired by, too. When I see something and I'm like, of course, like dead simple, no-brainer idea, like that's the thing that always really sticks the most.
Yeah, I like the actually from like a technology perspective. I really like a very analog thing that drives technology. I'm sure if you've seen it. It was Mercado Libre did the fields of the soccer stadium, but made it into a barcode as sort of these simple things. You're like, oh, it's always there. Like fuck.
Yeah, and then being able to work with them in Mexico as well, and have a totally different kind of high tech experience that we were with in concert with them. It's been really nice to see just both sides of that.
I think it's also have been an interesting shift in how the highlighted ideas were about before technology itself, but now it's more like human in the center, and technology is how we integrate technology in our processes, not just looking for the technology.
Yeah, not just the best application of the technology that is newest, but something that feels the most connected to someone's experience, the thing that they love about the brand, that's the closest to their lives, and doing that in a really meaningful way.
And looking at Monk's work this year, what projects best represent where the company is heading creatively?
The project in show, I really like the Mercado Libre sneaker cam. I think it's doing something very interesting, similar like with a human inside. But I think why it's representative of us is we know the digital space really well, we know the media really well, the user behavior. So it's sort of close to that, like more modern user behavior on digital, and then turning it into an experience that is actually added benefit for customers. What's your favorite?
Well, I think the Juan Gabriel one for Netflix.
Yeah.
Just because it really touches, and kudos to the Mexico team.
Shout out.
But it really touches on something that's so emotional, and at the same time, like the technology is there, but you don't see it. And I love the fact that it's not about it. It's not about the tech. It's actually about like how you experience that, and it's just part of it, and you made it possible in such like an amazing way. I think it's really good.
I had the chance to sit on a couple of juries for a couple of other award shows this year, and so much of our Mexico team's work was part of the Garrity Awards and the Effies. Things that I had to recuse myself from, but things like the Wednesday Addams, Argentina takeover, that literally the whole conversation in the room was like, how did they get that done? Like, that's wild. And some really great debate around, does that distract from the sort of like cultural resonance or the history of that area? And just, it was really great to see that be kind of a part of the case as well, so that it was intentional, that it would be something provocative, but then ultimately beautiful. And they returned it back to its original state. So we were able to say that.
Cannes isn't just about looking backward. It's also where the industry starts writing the brief for next year. It's like our New Year's Eve in the industry, right? And defining the work we wish we have done. So if Cannes 2025 tell us where creativity has been, what do you think Cannes 2026 is starting to take shift? What will 2026 reward?
I'm really excited to see the technology in action. Bernardo and I were talking about this earlier. I think the overwhelming conversation around AI, and of course that's a huge part of our priority as a company as well. This last year has been a lot of implementation. It's been a lot of baby steps. It's been a lot of like operational meetings with Carrie and her team trying to get things stood up. And I'm really excited to see now that the technology is in our clients' hands, in our team's hands, how they'll actually be able to stretch into next year, and the level of craftsmanship that we'll start to be able to bring once they have that fluency with the technology.
Yeah, I hope we're going to be pushing this year that we're moving away from one-offs to actually like systems for brands. I think right now technology, the cost prohibitiveness is going away. You can actually create so many different experiences for different audiences and different channels and different moments within the same campaign. So I'd love to see work that is more systemic that way, whereas like it's one big idea, but it's so expressed differently and nicely in different moments in different ways, so it doesn't feel like a one-off. I think we've seen a lot of that. I think it's time for us to see something that is more relatable to actually like what our clients really need.
Especially if you think about that, the average, what is it? Trend on social, it's like it's only there for 3 days. So I think that to be more effective with the work, we have to create a bigger cadence of actually nicer, recognizable, but still like surprising work in every moment. So that system is, I think, very important. But also just look at it from a creative opportunity perspective and less of a, what is it? performance-based perspective. Because I think that's where, like, with technology, it's always been put in that corner of like, it's like performance, or it's like social, or it's, which I think is sort of, we have to get rid of that idea. And I mean, it's freeing us up for a lot of good creative ideas, I think.
Well, back to that human-centric point that you made too, Yuka, you know, we often think of it in very much channel-first kind of mentality, even still today as marketers. And I think you see that reflected in a lot of the work that is in the shortlists and things that have come out the last few days of like beautiful films, beautiful print, but there's not as much of the storytelling around the whole ecosystem, the whole system that's been pulled together in order to make this campaign really effective. And it's really interesting to see that starting to change, hopefully, you know, that it can be more something that is based on those, you know, individual people's needs rather than just, you know, as much as we love making beautiful work.
Yeah. I was in the Effie's jury, the Iridium one, sort of the global best of the best. And the project that we chosen as the winner was EOS. I'm not sure, the what is it?
Well, it's lip balm, yeah.
Yeah, the sort of beauty brand, modern beauty brand. But they had such a, like, the reason why it won is that it had such a good cadence of constantly reconfirming sort of a system, a brand, but in a really authentic way. Like, everything was based around humans, and they did not once, they did it like constantly. And I think that was like, for the jury, was a moment where like, shit, never seen it like this before. Like, it's always a social campaign where that type of attitude comes out, but that they built their brand around it, and it was like a consistent 3-year-long big thing. But bless my cooch, like, there's like iconic work coming out of that. I think that was like standing out. So that's would be the work that I would wish I would have done or would be doing in the next one.
In my FE session, we had a lot of conversation about the Oreo cows. And people were questioning whether it was real. They were questioning, like, who is this guy? And it was really great to see the full case beyond just the video, to see how they brought it all the way through down to retail and packaging. And it was really based on that, you know, that key human insight around the way that people in Mexico enjoy Oreos, and they've missed out on this dunking moment, and increased both sales of Oreos and in sales of milk, which ended up being great for the cow farmers as well. But just to that point, it's, you know, a large-scale campaign that's across every conceivable touch point for a brand like them, and it's only through doing all of that in such a coordinated and directed way that you really get that outcome.
And what will define a truly great idea over the next few years? What do you think?
Well, I think there's always the discussion, what is a big idea? I think it's been historically, you know, a film, a manifesto, positioning, a stunt. I think that the great ideas are going to be the ones that are going to be expansive and expressive, so we'll be able to do a lot of things with it in a really meaningful way, and you can really go deep into the different cultures and the different moments and the different channels and the different opportunities in a way that you can really connect. So it's not just like you can revise the creative so it fits to all different experiences. It's like it's really meaningful in each one of those touch points, and intelligence is going to be a key. And that goes back to your point, where it's like technology is not just there to make it faster or to make it cheaper. It's like to make it smarter, right? Like an asset plus intelligent is a story. We're going to be telling performance stories, social stories, brand stories. It doesn't matter. What it matters is that, like, we can go deep and really understanding what we're trying to achieve at that moment.
Yeah, making it smarter and also more specific, right? We often say, especially when we're doing idea development, audience development, that like we go specific to go broad. If you make something that feels so true to how I use Vaseline or the way that I feel about my lip balm or whatever it might be, that's going to resonate so much further than we ever give ourselves credit for. We spend so much time talking about mirror marketing or, you know, that sort of average common denominator. But now that we are thinking about so much scale, it's so important that we are bringing in those really, really specific, deep stories into that scale. So it's not just scale for scale's sake.
I think there's also an interesting component. We're talking this week a lot with clients about that. So one of the works we're doing is the sort of the weird importance of brands again in this space, and then not necessarily the traditional way of brands, but really the brands that can flex and stretch, to your point. So instead of brand big ideas, it's brand big universe kind of situations. But I think that's an interesting thing if you think about like what will define a good idea. I think it's actually back to a very traditional notion of, if you can set a brand up that is really iconic, that is really clearly identifiable, that whenever you put it into any type of LLM or model, you actually get on-brand work out of it because it's recognizable. So I kind of like that as well about this moment, is that we have to get back to the basics.
So you think the definition of big idea is changing?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think it's what Bernardo was saying. Like you have to create a system that can flex and adopt and is very recognizable, but isn't a linear thing, isn't a single moment. It's really about like the scale and the flexibility of it.
I think also the experience too, how we experience brands.
Well, that's if you really want to get that in the path, I wonder if ads is going to be really the moment where brands are going to be built, because it's going to be so fast, it's going to be everywhere. So I think we definitely going to have to get back to the human, real experiences of being connected to a brand. So that will change probably in the next decade as well, as we're going to see different touch points for brand building.
Yeah, I think even so, we still see some of our best work, again, shout out to the Mexico City team, being those experiential moments with like brands that people care about, with IP that people really, really care about, and giving them that opportunity. We do a ton of work with Adidas as well, where we have these, very large, multifaceted experiential programs where people can have that depth of connection with a brand, and it's sort of immeasurable, right? It's not about a click, it's not about $1. It's about the amount of time and effort and energy that you're spending to take a part in this experience and spend the time with the brand.
And how do creative ideas need to evolve when brands have to operate across dozens of platforms, audiences, formats, and moments?
Well, that's the systemic thinking. It's instead of, it changes the way you think creatively, right? If you're looking to answer a brief, before, like, you had a very finite thing to fill. Like, you could fill a script for a 30-second commercial. Like, you knew you need to do a radio spot or like a print ad. Or now, like, it can be anything, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. Like, if you think about like we talk about Adidas, like a clothing brand experience. My wife would probably want to chat with agents for discoverability and kind of like find new things that she could wear because she likes it. Like, I want to listen to a podcast of someone that I kind of like this style. They will tell me like what the new things are. So it's not just variations of the same thing. It's really thinking about different expressions and experience for different audiences, but then like how you tie it all together. I think that's the key. It's like how it all adds up to some sort of brand truth, that familiarity, that thing that's actually like unique, that you don't lose track, no matter how different the experiences are. I think that's what I find it very exciting as a creative challenge.
It's so interesting too, like just that kind of choose your own adventure aspect, right? Of not everyone's going to want to, we talk a lot about the funnel disappearing, about shopping being nonlinear, about people going to agents, for some people going to agents to not even, take out their credit card. But really then because our job as marketers to empower people to find whatever they want, anywhere that they want, however they want, which requires a ton of scale, a ton of systemic thinking, and frankly, a lot of risk sometimes with our clients as well, of talking with them through this notion that, the customer journey is not going to be linear and people have to be empowered to bounce around.
That's an interesting note. There was a discussion yesterday in the panel I was in, the Palais, that whole idea of the trust we need to create with our customers, with our clients, that it's good ideas, that it's been that sort of results into effectiveness, but it's coming from actual intelligence. I think that there's something interesting there because of the vast majority of places and ideas and content and moments we need to create. Is how can you make sure that A is consistent, but B also comes from a place of real truth, which is going to be probably the biggest, hardest thing to do. Like it is the core of an agency's job to make clients feel very safe, sort of safe zone with our ideas. But at the same time, now if you need to do 200 different pieces of content, how do we create that? I think that's going to be an interesting challenge from a creative perspective.
And it's back to basics in a lot of the same way too, right? It's about building trust. It's about having that depth of relationship between us and our clients, but also, creative and strategy working really, really closely so that we're on the same page around what's the story being told, how does the brand show up, what are people really looking for, and then in these very complex comms plans that, we're really thinking through what's the goal of each one of these individual 10,000 assets or whatever that you might be making over the course of a campaign. It becomes a much bigger challenge, but it also necessitates a lot more collaboration.
And it's also not static, and that's the other thing. Like the whole idea of needs to be alive, living, evolving, which makes it even like an interesting challenge as well. But I think that is also, I must say that might be also something that I'm excited about, is how can we be creative in the moment, less than upfront? Because I think the most beautiful things will come from us working during a campaign or during sort of when content is live. So you can be more reactive and we can live more in the moment. Because I think that's like a shift we need to have as an industry. It's like,
what is interesting is that it will change completely the way you think about ideas, right? Because like you need ideas that are flexible enough for that to happen. So it's very common you see, let's say, metaphors being used for commercials because it's the simplest way to communicate something. It's single-minded message. You cannot, if the world is your oyster, you're not going to use oysters in everything that you do for your communications plan.
Unless it's an oyster brand.
Yes, but regardless, you're going to have to be able to, express it differently. So it changes the way you actually think about what a great idea actually is. Like what actually what is the anatomy of an idea that allows me to actually be strong enough to be recognizable, but at the same time different enough so I can actually express it like differently in different channels.
And over time, right? I think that notion of kind of optimization and thinking through the best ideas can keep evolving. You can kind of imagine going back to the Sustained Success Awards and things like that, that you just continue to really be recognizable in that same way so that, you connect with the brand in a deep way.
At Publicitaria, we work with DEI, and these past few years have been hard for diversity, equity, and inclusion because of political and cultural backlash. But when we are at Cannes Lions, the ideas that have been highlighted and awarded are still focusing on inclusion and diversity. How do you think that inclusion and diversity are still being something that makes creative excellence and teams work in a more innovative ways?
100%. I think that what wins is specificity and different of thinking. And I think that, if you come from different backgrounds, different places, you bring different experiences, and then you get like different point of views. The challenge with AI is that AI learns. So we need to be extremely mindful and thoughtful of what we're teaching AI. So the bias is not in the AI, right? So I think that's what the watch out for me is like, how you're actually training the models and the agents. So like the work that's come out actually represents that, inclusivity when there's no human involved.
We've talked a lot to just the last couple of days about impact and what a true depth of impact really can be. And that being maybe something that people are thinking about awarding to is part of where you start to see that sort of diversity and inclusion meta-narrative is because it does have this very, very deep connection to very specific people. And that's where I think, that's where we get the most excited as marketers, is being able to do things that feel like they have that. And that's, that's only there because you have the right people at the table that can think in that way.
I'm Dakota Fanning, and this is the LA Times Envelope Roundtable.
What do you guys make of the whole sensation? Did you do? It was so
How are you with quantum mechanics?
Welcome to another episode of the Envelope Podcast.
And I'm here today with Nava Mao.
True Detective Night Country is maybe your biggest, most high-profile project.
That element of fashion, of just something new in the Wheel of Time Season 2, so go for it.
And that'll do it for this week's episode of The Envelope.
In a world increasingly driven by algorithms, I think it's really important that we look for inspiration as creatives everywhere. Otherwise, we are stuck in the same our own echo chamber that's driven by the algorithms. So it's really important as creatives and as marketers in general that we never take off our marketer's hat. Even as we are acting as consumers and scrolling through the feeds and seeing what the algorithm feeds us, it's really important, I think, to try to dissect and look at the anatomy of what caught my attention, and what about it, what do we think was their strategic approach, what was the intent, what made it effective, what made it memorable, And beyond what's being kind of thrown into my feed, I think it's really important that we look for, especially as the algorithms are making everything more and more the same and homogenized, that ideas can be inspired by anything, through nature, through art, through performance, through language. Everywhere that we look, we need to bring all of that into the ways that we think and kind of never stop being a creative at heart. After many years working with some of the world's biggest brands on some large campaigns and always looking at others for inspiration, some things never change in terms of what makes the most memorable creative. You know, even as the ways that we're making and the things that we're making are evolving, the core principles stay pretty steady. You know, whether what they're doing is creatively interesting, if it's authentic to the brand, if it's believable, if it's credible, if it's, you know, for it to resonate with consumers, it has to have a point of view. It has to be saying something differentiated, but not just what the consumers want to hear, and not something just what the brands want to say, but something that is able to kind of foster that connection between the two. With consumers being exposed to more and more content, it's really important for us to remember that as much as we can scale content, connection is the hardest thing to scale, right? So scale is a marketer's term, and what's capturing consumers' attention is showing up authentically as a brand with something interesting to say that either aligns to the consumer's interests and what they care about and shows up natively and naturally in the same environment and context in which they're already spending their time, or intentionally contrast it against, because that is the intention of the brand, to sort of zig while everyone else is zagging. So what's capturing attention is something that appeals to an audience's senses. You know, we're also looking more and more as things get more digital. How can we, when I talk about contrast, how can analog be something that feels more tangible, more expressive, more different, and appealing to different senses or sensibilities? Or how can digital be the way in, because it's so exact and so precise and so of the moment? But in either way, we need to make sure that we are taking into account the consumer mindset, the cultural nuance, and everything that's happening to make something not just relevant, but resonant with the consumer. Creativity for generations described the things that we made: the book, the film, the song, the ad. And now with technology being what it is, you know, creativity also describes how we're making things, and for consumers, even how they're consuming things, right? So advertising used to be something that people watch, and with social media it became much more something that people could participate in. So what makes something effective these days is something that is not just resonant, as I was saying before, but shareable, participatory. And so consumers, everyone thinks of themselves as their own brand. We also think that every consumer effectively has their own media channels, right? So something that is good enough for somebody to watch is also should be good enough for them to want to share. And the more that they can participate in the dialogue and have this exchange with the brands, the more willing they would be to not just participate, but to amplify what the message is. With modern technology and AI allowing us to just create infinite scale and produce endless amount of content, that can be very effective in its own ways. But with the proliferation of content, and especially digital, there is such a demand and an appetite for consumers to actually experience things in different ways. We can appeal to all five senses. And so as things get more digital, there's more room and more value placed also on analog experiences, right? So something that somebody can actually walk through and touch and interact with and smell and taste sometimes, you know, that can appeal to and be memorable in totally different ways. And also with a lot of what we're doing, ultimately advertising technology, services and platforms, hardware and software together, you know, we could showcase what the technology does, but it's so much more impactful when a consumer can actually experience it, especially in a fun and entertaining way, or offering some sort of utility. So specifically, as an example, thinking about the YouTube drive-in, the generative drive-in theater we did for YouTube at Google Beach this week. It was an opportunity for us to showcase how powerful the tools that the technology that Google creates can be in the hands of creators. So we could have, of course, had a demo, and we have people open up a laptop and punch in their prompts, or even through conversational UI, and just kind of describe what they want to see and then show them, you know, just on the screen. that wouldn't be that memorable, right? That would be a very functional exhibit of what the technology does. Instead, it's important, I think, to wrap it in a story. So we came up with this creative hook of a drive-in theater. It's playing into a bit of nostalgia, but it's a vehicle, pardon the pun, that allows us to deliver the message in a very simple way. Doing something simple is very hard, but that's the most effective, right? So people see this drive-in theater, and from the time that they enter the lobby, grab their YouTube branded popcorn and move from the lobby to the seat in the car, and they understand, because of all the tropes that are built into this concept, they're going to sit in the car and watch a movie. But from the time that they enter to the time that they sit in the car, we're making the movie with them as the main character. So by the time they're sitting in the vehicle, they're watching a movie trailer with themselves, you know, either flying to space or battling their dinner partner for the last fry. And it's just such an easy get, and ultimately a really powerful creative expression of what the generative technology can do. And then going back to what I was saying before, to make this even more powerful and to make this more impactful, it's something that's not just participatory, but shareable. And because it's participatory, it's inherently more shareable. So as consumers are walking out of the experiences with smiles on their faces, we're really enjoying seeing the delight that people are having going through this. You know, they want to download the asset. We have a digital poster that's an animated graphic of, you know, the movie that they were just featured in. And then that's something that they want to share with their friends and their followers. And by having this experiential moments, and we were able to deliver to admittedly a pretty limited audience, right? Throughput is always going to be a bottleneck, but if you do that well, then you can amplify from there, right? Because you do that well, it's like the billboard travels more through the photographs of the billboard than the traffic that runs by it. So as our world gets more digital, I think it's important, we'll always have digital components. We had a demo at the center of this. Interactivity is paramount, but what is the tactile experience that we're building around to get people to the demo, through the demo, and then beyond the demo, but all with a story as a through line, as the lines between content, commerce, and, sorry, what was the third?
Experience.
As the lines between content, commerce, and experience get blurred, what does great creative look like today? I'd say it looks different because we're constantly pushing the envelope, and we're able to produce content that's, you know, was unable to be produced on timelines that just didn't exist before. So in some ways, it's going to be constantly evolving. We want to always look different, and yet some of the fundamentals remain the same, right? So what makes for good creative today is also what makes for good creative last year and last decade. At the same time, what makes good creative today is also changing, because we're not just talking to consumers anymore. We are also talking to the algorithms, and we're talking to the agents that are speaking to the algorithms, and agents that are making decisions on behalf of the consumer. So in some ways, great creative is invisible to the consumers, but we are optimizing the creative to be able to ultimately reach them through all these channels in the most pointed and exacting way. And on the other hand, especially with tactile, experiential creative, it's not at all about going through the agents and the machines, but, you know, in between, we're also, great creative isn't just about making great ads. We're also making systems and workflows and products that help us get to great creative. So creative isn't just the output. I like to say to my team, you know, I'm happy to say first off that it's refreshing to recognize we are mostly on the other side of the first phase of AI. What I liken to, I mean, this is where AI slop came from, but people were making tons of content and posting about it just to show they made something just to make it. Okay, so as the technology was really new, people were having a lot of fun with it, but really losing sight of the purpose behind what they were making. And working in digital marketing for almost, or even over 20 years now, the technology is rarely the story itself. Sometimes in a concept, the medium is the message. But more often, if you're talking about the technology, it's very gratuitous, right? So what's most important is what we're making and why we're making it. But now what I like to tell my team is how we're making it is just as important, right? So our process is our product just as much as never losing sight of what we're making, why we're making it, who we're trying to reach, what their experience is. But the journey that we took to get there is also a story unto itself, especially as a partner to Google, who isn't just using AI, but is making AI for everyone else to use, in their own creative endeavors, that we want to showcase not just what we made, but how we made it. Of course, AI is one of the biggest topics of conversation, again, here at Cannes and every day in the industry. How has it changed the creative process? It's changed it a lot. In the early days, we were looking at our macro workflows and then breaking those down into like micro processes and injecting AI into each of those, or trying to discover where we could to accelerate. But ultimately, we were still just collapsing timeframes, that we would apply to traditional workflows. And now we have completely remade many of our workflows to be AI empowered. We are concepting, keeping in mind how we're going to be designing with AI. We are developing briefs that are informed by insights that are derived from agents that are studying synthetic audiences that are based on, real people and their input. But ultimately, there's a lot that the technology can do for us. But what is changing, and also has never changed, is the importance of human intent and creative steering. And I really believe in this blended intelligence model that we apply. And as much as we have gone through a lot of organizational transformation, remade our team, adapted to a new mindset of this blended intelligence, ultimately, it's important that talent and technology are working together, each doing what they do best. And I think with regards to the creative steering and human intent, what we can do better than the AI is apply judgment. The humans will have more empathy. We have more sense of cultural nuance. We have just better sensibilities around not just what can we make, but what should we make. And just because we can doesn't mean that we should go and produce everything that we're able to. Looking at brands that are doing well today, what they understand about the consumer is exactly that. They're thinking about the consumer. So a lot of brands go wrong when they are thinking exclusively about their own message. I see brands do this all the time, that they're producing content for themselves ultimately. So if they're not keeping in mind, the consumer, how they're reaching them, where they're reaching them, and really thinking about like finding the insights that are going to inspire great creative, that are grounded in human truth and the consumer's point of view, there has to be some sort of value exchange, whether it's information or education or utility or entertainment. Ultimately, the consumer has to get something out of it, out of this exchange that the brand can actually deliver, either in that exchange in real time, in that moment, or something that they are promoting, their service or their product or their presence, that the message resonates because that is something that's going to fill or solve a need state for the consumer. Yeah, so looking ahead over the next 5 years and how creativity is going to evolve, I think a few things are going to happen. First off, there's going to be a lot more change of who we're creating for. This is going to sound a little dystopian, but to reach the consumer, we're going to have to advertise to the algorithms and the agents that are informing the algorithms. So there's going to be a lot that is systematized and automated. However, there's a lot of creativity that goes into that because we're going to be working with the technology to build systems instead of ads, systems that make ads for all of these pipelines to ultimately get to the consumer. So there's a lot of creativity in the making, even if the expressions are somewhat invisible to the human eye. At the same time, I think while things get more and more digital, there's going to be so much more appetite for analog experiences, right? I don't think we'll ever be entirely analog, especially with technology partners, and we're promoting, if their services are software and hardware, ultimately building experiences around them that cater to or connect to humans in multi-sensory ways, and creative expressions that are tactile and tangible and physical even, and people can walk into an environment and take it in and interact. So, we saw it after pandemic. There was such a boom in after people kind of got past that initial fear of being around other people again. People really wanted to go back to movie theaters, and people wanted to go to concerts, and people wanted to travel and have human experiences, in nature, in spaces. in big and small, but we are catering to those desires and having experiences that connect with people that are 5 inches from a screen, 5 feet from a screen, 50 feet from a screen, but ultimately building demos and experiences and in its higher, like the context around which that demo is even taken in. So we're not just feeding the feeds, but we're also feeding the human experience. If every brand leader could take something away from Cannes, it's that you cannot automate everything. The technology allows us to do a lot. Brands can create thousands of assets, but if there isn't a strong insight driving the ideas, if there isn't a great idea, then consumers still aren't going to care. So just because you can scale content doesn't mean that you can scale connection, right? The hardest thing, scale is a marketer's term, right? Consumers care about what's in front of them. The hardest thing to scale is connection. And the best way to get to connection is through a blended intelligence model. So if there's one thing for brands to take away from Cannes, it's that technology can help advance and accelerate ideas and more rapidly adapt, iterate, optimize, and then reship. But human intent, creative steering, that the role that people play with technology, and it's in that blended intelligence model where humans and machine, talent and technology working together is where the real power is.
honestly, we're kind of living in a little bit of a collaboration age when it comes to marketing. So you see a lot of marketers moving into that space and a lot happening in that space between brands, designers, etc. But I do feel like we're hitting a little bit peak collaboration. There's almost too much of it happening. And I think we're going to actually go to a new space that's hopefully a little bit more fertile, that's more about kind of the values, the essence of the brand, what makes it unique, and a little bit of this world building. A lot of brands now are interested in, how do I create this world around my product, my brand? What's interesting about it? What's unique about it? Who does it apply to? Who does it not apply to? And creating a little bit more of a, not a walled garden in a certain sense, but one where only the people that really want to be a part of it are actually a part of it. And so I think that's something that we're trying to, or that we're seeing. I think on the AI side, honestly, I've been at so many summits and congresses recently, like Google Cloud Summit and all over the place. And obviously agentic is in everyone's mouth. But I do feel that if you listen to folks like Shelley Palmer or some of these other folks, that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And I think we still have a little bit of ways until we get to that place. And that we're also working within the realm of AI where it's basically taking everything from us right now. And the output, we still don't know what that's going to be. And so I think it's a little bit murky in terms of, there's a lot of folks selling you agents. And I think you have to be very careful about who's selling you agents and what they're doing, and ask some really hard questions about, what data they're using and how it's going to work, et cetera. I mean, I think the most direct way of understanding a real trend is really seeing who's using it and how they're using it, whatever that might be, in that space. Because I do think that when you see hype, it's very quick. It's very much kind of, I want it and I want it now. Whatever that might be, who knows how long the matcha craze will exist or last. But I do think that some hype items or hyped markets do become a longer term trend. But I think we have to look at how people are using it, how people are engaging it, how often are they engaging it, what are they doing with it. And I also think that you have to look at the other, let's say you have to have a good antenna for the people within the culture. And if there's new inputs into that hype as well, if there's more to it than just, I gotta look at the member clubs in New York and how they're all popping up left and right. And I think you have to really look at kind of, for instance, who is driving that, and is the market responding to it? And are people actually spending money over time on it? Because there's really no way of really knowing 100%, but yeah. Yes, AI is a big part of it. And obviously if you go to all, Google Beach and all the other beaches, you're gonna hear AI a lot, and most people are opening a panel with AI. I feel like from my circles, what I've heard is creators. And I actually think it's very interesting because I've been coming to Cannes for 15 years. And what I've noticed is that we had the kind of marketing, advertising bubble, if you will, and then we kind of ushered in the tech bubble, which we're still more or less in and continue to be in only actually because of AI, I think. I think that if AI was not a topic right now, the tech bubble here would have definitely died down a little bit. But I think with all the creators here this year, it's a really unique kind of opportunity in a way, because you have marketing and advertising that were in their own bubble. You have tech that was in its own bubble. And most people didn't really know what Cannes was outside of those bubbles. But with creators here, because they have a B2C audience, you have a ton of people that are like, where is this person that I follow? What are they doing? That looks so cool. And I can imagine that in 5 years from now, Cannes might be, I'm not saying a Coachella of brands and creators, but I can imagine a lot of just regular, and there's actually some people that I met already on this trip where I said like, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? What are you working in? And they said, oh, I'm just here on vacation. And I said, but you have like 20 bands on your arm. What? And she's like, no, it's just one of the creators that I follow. He was here and I thought I'd come out and I'd check it out. And she literally went to every single beach just to check out what was happening. And so I do think that Cannes might actually go through a little bit of a metamorphosis to more B2C focused, especially because if these fans of creators, et cetera, influencers want to come here, they want to participate, there might be actually less B2B focus and more B2C focus in the next 5 years. So that's one interesting trend I see for Cannes. On AI, what's changed between last year and this year, definitely just agents. Like that's everyone is talking about agents now. I do think overwhelmingly there's a little bit more of a trepidation, maybe because some of the larger model companies have been saying we need a pause. So you kind of feel that a little bit in the conversations. I don't know how that's going to affect business, but I do know just from my own business, there are plenty of clients that are interested in having folks talk to them from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. We want to hear from them. We want to know how we can get deeper involved into AI. We're already using this platform. We're already developing this in-house, but we want more. So I don't really think that there's a real pause, honestly. I think, at least on the business end. I think a lot of it is just the testing and trialing, to be honest. I mean, the business value is coming in very little steps here and there in terms of like organizing processes, just like back end. There's a lot of companies that I've been working with that are actually doing a lot on the back end, cleaning up processes, streamlining things. I definitely know that even though there is this constant headline of job loss, et cetera, I've seen the job loss, but also then the hiring of folks. Like kind of, I don't want to say in their place, but people that are obviously very knowledgeable about kind of putting an agent in place, for instance. And that's what I've seen actually more than a few CEOs that I've worked with. They actually have their agent set up. So they brought somebody in to essentially help them customize an agent on top of their data stack that they already have to essentially, they haven't gotten rid of that's actually bad terminology. They have not transitioned to not having an EA, but they have a agent chief of staff next to a human chief of staff. They have a head of strategy that is also an agent next to a head of strategy. So I almost think it's like this doubling a little bit of roles. And I think they're pulling from both right now to see kind of what's useful, what's helpful. And based on where they see kind of the best net positive effect, that's where they're going to transition, obviously, right? And it's a very big difference compared to social, because I was there at the very beginning of the social curve as well. I was working with Walmart and Facebook at the same time when we were trying to build up the fan base to 11 million and, like spending a lot of marketing dollars on media on the platforms. And I think the difference is that people have learned from kind of just throwing budgets everywhere when it came to social. And now with AI, I think people are way more considered about, okay, what do we actually want to achieve versus just setting goals that are kind of arbitrary. And so I think with AI, you see much more focused approach to, well, where do we want to implement and how do we want to implement? And I think what you're seeing is, like I said, very much on the back end. I think when it comes to consumer facing, a lot of companies are still very cautious about how they want to use AI technology because there's been already more than a few case studies, I don't have to name them, but where it's been negative, right? Where the customer feels like you've taken, like this is a worse process now because of implementing AI, right, into this process. And so I think on the customer side, that's the area where there's still gonna be a lot of kind of cautionary, kind of like, let's wait and see how things play out. And I think the other aspect to look at is how those agents are then going to be used by the customers as well. Because I think there's customers that are using agents right now, but they're not using them in mass. And it's really hard to tell, I think, for most companies, like, what is the behavior going to be like? When are they going to talk to these agents? Is it throughout the day? Is it only when they're interacting with our brand? Is it only when they're having issues with the brand? Is it when they're coming into our stores? What is that like? And I don't think anybody really knows yet. And so that's, I think, one of the areas that's going to have to be kind of trialed and tested next. I always say, test it, trial it, do it. I know that actually I have a colleague at SAP who says, I'm tired of pilots, just like stop with the pilots, just do it. I really do believe in that, because if you're not trialing or testing, you're not making any type of mark, you're not having any type of learning. There's no cycle where you can kind of reproduce results and try to improve things. And so I feel like at least if you're trialing and testing, you're going to get to something, whether it's good or bad, but you're going to learn from it at the end of the day. I would also say the other side of the coin is culture. It's not spoken enough generally in the innovation space, but like having a culture that allows, obviously failure, that allows innovation to thrive. There's still not enough companies that have invested in kind of, I don't want to say creating that culture change, but in terms of developing an environment in which people are able to really participate in the innovation. So it's very siloed still in most organizations. There's some obvious ones. Automotive industry has already experienced a lot of disruption. I think as we move into the energy industry right now, obviously with the need for energy for the data centers, et cetera, like there's a lot to grapple with there as well. I think, and this might be specific, but like I talk to a lot of companies and it doesn't matter if it's chemicals or CPG. I think everyone is going through this feeling of how are we going to stay relevant within the next 10 to 20 years, not just in terms of our product, but our brand and what we're trying to bring to the consumer. And so there's just so much disruption across the board. Finance and banking, there's financial service companies, won't name any, but that are also thinking about kind of how are we going to protect our customers from a cybersecurity standpoint. Everyone's really worried about their information becoming hacked, et cetera. I think every industry is honestly going through a very transitory phase right now, to be honest. I think AI can help with a lot of that, but I also think, like I said, if you're not testing, you're not going to know where the pitfalls are. But I don't think I could pick out one industry for you. I think across the board, I don't know a single industry, even the Swiss watchmaking industry where I've talked to folks, I don't think there's a single industry I know where people aren't saying, yeah, we have to see, the next years might be a little bit tough. I actually think the customer is going to profit on, let's call it on the surface, which is that in terms of the way that they're engaging with the brand, I think that it's going to be more obviously personalized. It's going to feel more authentic. If it actually is authentic under the surface is another question. I do think that authenticity is this buzzword that we've been using for the last 5 years, I feel like. And I do feel like we're at this point where most customers actually feel that if they don't get a personal touch in one form or another, it's not an authentic brand experience, right? And I think that people are craving that. They want in real life moments, they want to understand what the brand's about. They want to feel like they're part of a community. This is where I go back to this idea of world building. I think a lot of brands are really interested in building those worlds for their consumers because that's how they're going to, the negative way of looking at it would be trap their consumer there, but allow their consumer to be able to engage with the brand on a daily basis that feels real. Otherwise, it's just a kind of a race to the bottom in terms of, product market fit and product costs and these types of things. And so I think brands are realizing we have to do that. I think some brands are going to do very well with that. I mean, you see brands like Liquid Death, which has done phenomenal in that kind of space. Other brands that I work with have done really well, but I do think that it's not easy for some brands, especially finding their purpose and values and matching it to kind of their communities that are utilizing the product or buying the product. One layer is definitely, Gen Z and how they evolve within the workforce and kind of what work means to that generation, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to culture and the people that are essentially within your organization that are working to further that purpose, whatever that purpose might be. And so I think really understanding the next generation of workers, how they work, how they want to work, but not only that, but also inspiring them and pushing them in maybe a particular direction if it's helpful for the organization and the purpose. And I don't think a lot of companies are actively doing that. They're looking very much on the B2C side, kind of, like output, like how are we engaging with Gen Z? But I think on the organizational side, there's probably not a lot done there. I also think that, and I speak to a lot of folks that work at companies that are fully remote, for instance, I think the pendulum is going to swing back, because I just hear from a lot of people that are working remote, like, I can't take it anymore. I have to get out. And I relish, being able to like go visit my boss in this location or go to this event or whatever it might be, just to be around people. And that's the overwhelming sense that I get, that I really do think like in the next 5 years, organizations need to do a much better job of, even if they're a remote first or remote only organization, they have to think about how are we going to create belonging amongst our organization within obviously the employee base. How are they engaging with each other? What are they doing? Not just from a work perspective, it's obviously, I think, very helpful. I think the data is out on that you do essentially create more productivity out of your workforce by having people together, and ideas spread quickly and ideas are kind of generated much more quickly. But I think at the other side, there's the social aspect that a lot of people are missing. So I think a lot of companies need to prepare for, how are we going to allow our workforces to be able to like come together more often? I'm not saying you're going to see a boom in office space, but there might be something else. Maybe there are, I don't want to say we've already had co-working and that boom, but I do think there's probably other opportunities to do things in that space as well. I think generally there's a lot of CEOs and CMOs that I see that are really thinking about, like I said, this kind of like AI approach and then the cultural approach. And those are the two approaches. And I think you have to do both. You can't just do one or the other. And so I think most of them are focused on, how are we going to reach our customer through new technology, and how are we going to reach our customer through the culture that we're trying to build within this world? And those are the two things that I think most CEOs and CMOs have to start understanding and stop running after, as you were mentioning, what separates trends from hype. I don't think that influencers are not just a hype because obviously they've generated results, but I do think, I talked to some brands and they have, they've done programs with influencers where they've created products with influencers, and those products have flopped essentially. And I think the reason why is because a lot of influencers, they have reach, they have an audience, but they often don't have a community. And so working with people that actually have a community that are intrinsically bound to that person, whoever they are, if they're a fashion designer or a chef, whoever they might be, I think brands are thinking about shifting the focus away from influencers and going more towards that side and the culture side. It's a generality, but I think being open, to be quite honest. I know quite a few CMOs that, they go to this CMO dinner and they go to this CMO dinner and they go to this CMO dinner. And I do think that it's very valuable to kind of exchange within your CMO group set. But at the same time, if you're not looking at other avenues in terms of not your typical kind of marketing fair or marketing event here, I think you're really missing out. Because actually, and I have this conversation a lot, within Cannes, there's also the bubbles of nationality, right? You have a huge contingent of Germans that come here. They're all more or less, they say to themselves, right? They're at their events, they're at, their beaches, and there's not a lot of crossover. And it's the same with, I think to a certain extent, like the South American, like you have a lot of these international cultures that are all here, They're all working in similar spaces, but there's still not a lot of crossover. And so for me, that's one of the things I actually love about Cannes is that I get to meet the people that I would not normally be able to meet. I'd have to go to New York, LA, Mexico City, Sao Paulo to like meet everybody, and everybody comes here. And so if you're not making use of that, I feel like you're doing a disservice to yourself because everybody's actually here that would be super relevant for you. That's number one. And number two, I would probably say that I've seen great panels here and I've had fantastic meetings, but for me, I had a shuttle ride back from Shelley Palmer's breakfast yesterday with 6 other people. And in that shuttle ride, we actually created like a note, like a Apple Note with all the conversation that we had in the shuttle, all of our contact information. We have a group chat already that we're chatting into. That to me, I feel like a lot of CMOs that I meet, they're not getting that. And that experience is the most important experience because that's going to open you up to new kind of understanding, new insights, et cetera, from other people that you might normally not be around. So
that's great. I can just add, you say the one thing I thought executives need can take this.
Okay. The one thing I would love executives to leave Cannes with this week is, okay.
Anything else?
It's a lot of AI, obviously. It is. Like I said, I do think the culture piece it's being somewhat neglected. And you have folks like Oren John, who's a creator, influencer on Instagram, and they have a villa with a bunch of other folks that are doing the same thing. And I think that regardless of whether they stay in villas or not over the coming years, that set of people is going to become more and more relevant here, like in the center of Cannes, because I do think brands are trying to tap into that and understand how can we build these worlds around our consumers and around our products. And we're just scratching the surface. I feel like that's gonna take a dramatic shift in the coming years. So, yeah.
Hi, it's Dave Carey. I am the Global EVP of Embedded Studios and Production at Monks. I would agree AI is changing the way that content is produced. And how is it changing it is probably twofold. We look at AI in a couple different ways. We look at it for production through automation and then generation of creative. Automation is pretty standard these days. It resizes work. It takes the ad and makes it into multiple languages. Multiple sizes, adapts it for fit for social, etc. That's pretty standard. With AI generation, I think what's really helping is with the creativity around how creatives can produce work. They can produce it faster, they can produce it multiple variations. And what I think it does is it allows clients to see the creative in real time. So it used to take weeks to see a storyboard, to see maybe clips of how a creative idea would come to life. But with AI, it allows clients to see it within days. And then they can actually pick the direction, they can determine which direction they want to go, and then allows us to go to market quicker, faster, and cheaper. But it really helps us excel creativity. And in our company, at least, the creatives love using it and our clients love to interact with it. It has changed with the resourcing. AI has helped resourcing by given the ability to create more for less, actually. Personalization was always promised by creative, a different color, different message, different idea for each of the audiences that were looking at the creativity. But you could never scale it because there was just not enough resources to do it. But now with AI, it allows you to come up with multiple versions, personalize it to different audiences at the same cost and even faster than what you could before. So it's really helped to individualize the creative messaging for each of the target markets. with AI production, speed and cost savings is definitely a factor. I mean, we've seen savings up to 40 to 60% off traditional production cost. But I think what is very important is the effectiveness that it can bring, because again, it can be personalized, very targeted towards the audiences that you want to target. But it allows for more creative ideas, like I mentioned in the first question, faster, and it allows you to bring your client in earlier to actually take a look at a clip. You know, I want to see a car doing this through the highway, or driving through highways, or driving across or in front of the ocean. You can actually bring that idea to life for clients to see visually how that is going to look before you go out to shoot, before you go out to do any CGI work, before you go into any post-production. You can actually do the idea, see it, and then execute it. So it just, again, like I said, it helps bring the clients closer to the creative, and actually brings the creative idea closer to our team as well, to not just the creatives that come up with the conceptual idea, but to the account people, to the strategy people, to the production people. It allows them to fine tune the idea before the final production is created. AI, a few years ago, I mean, it was coming, first of all, not everyone knew how it would impact the industry and how it would be effective across the industry. I'll go back. Every week AI changes. It allows us to do something different. It allows us to do something new. The technology is very as rapidly advancing, and it's more the people that use it that need to become faster. But a specific example for AI that you couldn't do even 2 months ago was product accuracy. I mean, you were having a real hard time producing cars or cereal boxes or phones with AI to get actually the right logo, the right product accuracy. You had to go in and still do a lot of retouching. You had to go in and still do a lot of manual labor. In the last 2-3 months, the product accuracy has become close to 100%. So, and that's going to continue to get better even, in the next 6 months. So we had a client, General Motors, that said, do cars in AI. And 6 months ago, we said, we can't do it. It's impossible. And today we're producing every single model, very accurate, 100% with AI. There are ways that we can validate accuracy with AI. There's tools now that we've created to definitely validate the accuracy. But most cases, you have to start with CAD data or product data, train the LLMs on that data. And then once you have the LLMs trained on the data, then you can cross-reference it. After that is produced, then you can actually use a scan. We use a scanning tool that actually scans the the AI version compared to the data that was ingested into the LLM, and then it picks up the flaws, if any. But the more you train, the better it gets. So the first time you train, maybe you get 90% accuracy. The next time you train, 92%. The next time you train, 97%, until finally you get to 100%. It's not just one round. There's multiple rounds to do this. But in the end, you eventually get product accuracy. I actually see in-housing increasing now. I mean, I came from building in-house models from all over to Monks. I've been building in-house models for the last 10 years, and I've built close to 100 of them. And people say, well, is AI going to diminish in-housing? And I actually think it's not. It's going to increase it. But what's going to happen to those teams is they're going to become smaller. I see it as squads of 10 people, probably, maybe a couple AI prompters, our director, a strategist, and then they work directly with the brand manager to execute an idea. Everyone's going to be able to use AI. They're already using it, but in the next 3 years, it's going to become a common tool. The only thing that's going to be a differentiator is the brand strategy. So I see these small little squads sitting directly with the marketing directors, VP of marketing. They come up with a strategy. That strategy then executed into a prompt. That prompt is looked at, and then AI generation comes out of that. Then you have an art director to visually make sure that it conforms with the brand identity, the visual landscape. But I see these becoming more and more valid, and you'll have pockets of these squads across organizations. So you might not have the 50, 60, 70 person in-house models that you have now. They may shrink, but you're going to still have this, and they'll just be more effective and faster and more cost effective than the traditional in-house model. There's always going to be, what's valuable for creative is always going to be the big idea. I mean, there's still going to be, it's probably going to become more valuable, like I said, because ideas are, everyone's going to be able to use it for automation and speed. So really what you need AI to do, or what you need creatives to do, is to really come up with an idea that's different than anybody else, because everyone's going to be executed. So I see that that creative teams will grow. They just have to grow in a different way. They'll have to grow by understanding how to prompt. They'll have to grow about understanding outputs of what AI tooling is the best to use. Some tools are not great at product fidelity. Others are great at backgrounds. Others are good at creating environments. Some are not great at creating products. So it's really understanding the tool set that is going to be needed to create the best possible visual and the best possible outcome. And then you tie that into a big idea, and executing that big idea through the right prompts, through the right visual identities, train the LLMs the proper way. You're just going to get more effective and a stronger idea, because you're also allowed to see that you can try 3 or 4 different ideas, like I mentioned, and see the instant results within 5-10 minutes. And then you can actually go in and pick the one that's performing the best, and then really focus on that to enhance it and to actually create a stronger idea. So I think it's about creating relevance and still coming up with a big idea. And AI is going to help to just help the creative be more relevant to the audience that they're speaking to. I mean, for me, it's still going to come down to the strongest brand strategy. Like I mentioned, everything is going to be able to use AI. The only thing that's going to make an idea stronger is how well how big the idea is, how strong the strategy is, and then how relevant it is to the consumer. So AI gives you the advantage to all of that. It allows you to come up with ideas quicker. It allows you to validate the ideas faster, and then allows you to make the idea more personalized through various versions that you can then go to market with. The problem is going to come down to, AI is going to allow you to produce a lot of content. There's a point where there's just going to be too much content. So what is the right amount of content that actually is relevant, and you're not producing thousands of things that never get used? Because then your media costs go up. You try to then spend more money to get all these ideas out. So the biggest driver is a really concern is, like, you have to limit the amount of content and make that content the strongest possible content that's going to resonate. I think the biggest misconception about AI on impact on teams is that it's going to reduce them. It's going to cost people jobs. That's a give me. The other thing is, I think that people believe it's going to reduce the creative idea. That is just everything's going to be just generated through machines, and there's going to be no big idea. So I think those are misconceptions. I think that the creativity, like, our industry will grow in people, but it's going to be a different type of individual. It's going to be the people that understand the right tools. It's going to be the people that understand how to prompt. It's going to be the people that understand how to use technology and talent combined. I don't see it decreasing. I see it increasing, but it's just going to be a different skill set. Much like when the internet came, you had to remove much of people, but then you hired new people in order to be able to adapt to the needs needed. The next thing I think is that the creativity, like I said, it shouldn't destroy creativity. It actually should make it stronger, because you're allowed to see the ideas. You're allowed to test the ideas. You're allowed to come up with multiple ideas, and then whatever one is the strongest, you move forward. And then you can actually bring in more and more insight and more data very quickly against that idea. So creativity should go up. I see the size of creative teams going up, and the misconception is the other. It's going to go down, and I don't see that happening. If you look at Monks, I mean, we say the companies of the future are going to be the ones that combine that has the best tech and the best talent. I think it's a combination of both. You have to have the best tech out there, because tech allows you to create ideas faster and cheaper and maybe better. But then you have to have the right talent that understands how to use that technology to bring the idea to life. You have to have a mixture of both. It can't be one. It has to be a combined unit, and it has to be, and then you have to have people adopt to that as well. You have to have the clients understand that it is a combination of tech and talent. Now you have to have internal people understand it's a combination of tech and talent. So that transformation of mindset is going to be very important in the next 2-3 years for on both client and agency side to understand how these two things come together in order to produce the most cost-effective creative possible.
I'm Paul Heathcote. I'm the VP of Applied AI from Stellia. It's my role to work with our customers to help them to translate solutions that they need into deliverables on our platform. So I think the biggest change that I've seen in the last year is definitely a shift away from pilots to real world applications at scale. And I think what that's doing is it's really surfacing a lot of the challenges associated with how do you put in place foundations for enterprise AI systems that enable organizations to properly govern them at scale. Where do I see AI making the biggest impact right now? I would say it's in the content supply chain. And I think that's the case because it lends itself very well to giving creative teams superpowers in a way that, perhaps for some other disciplines, it's less straightforward to get there. The creativity that it unlocks, whether it's in planning or it's in content or it's in images or it's in video, and the ability to iterate really rapidly, I think is really translating to very significant results. One thing that I would say people are getting wrong about AI is perhaps a focus on the idea of autonomous agents as opposed to AI being deployed in structured workflows. I come from a consulting and business transformation background where I spent a lot of time designing operating models and business processes that were executed by people, right? And within those processes, we're very clear about what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and we want the process to be repeatable. I think there's a lot of hype around autonomous agents and self-learning systems. I think doesn't necessarily translate very well to an enterprise context that is expecting predictable, repeatable business process execution. What has surprised me most about the way businesses are adopting AI is that there is definitely a very significant top-down pressure, whether that's from executives, investors, the board. And I think that's running into challenges on the ground because there's definitely a lack of capability and experience in many teams is not used to dealing with this technology that works in fundamentally a different way from traditional software that's very kind of deterministic by definition in its output. And so I think there is a real disconnect between expectations and capability. Not that the possibilities aren't there, they absolutely are, but it just requires working in a very different way. As AI becomes more and more widely adopted, and the role for human judgment, I think, is even more important because of the volume of content and decisions that can be surfaced at a velocity and a scale that's just not been possible before. So I think the human judgment is going to really come into play where it has to be about, well, which decisions do humans have to be in the loop on? And where can we delegate responsibility? But back to what I was saying earlier, that delegation of responsibility should be in the context of a structured workflow with known inputs and known outputs. Otherwise, it becomes then very difficult to apply that kind of delegation idea confidently into your business because you literally don't know what's going to happen, right? And I think that's where the human judgment is going to really come in. It's making those decisions about, well, where does the human judgment need to be applied? Why is AI architecture so important to get right? I think the barriers to entry to doing something with AI are quite low, but the barriers to entry to doing something properly that will scale in the enterprise are much higher, and it requires the architectural foundations to be put in place that will enable you to scale, that will enable you to govern it, and that will enable it to actually add value within your business. And so making sure that you have the architectural foundations in place before you scale will enable you to do that much more quickly and iterate. many organizations that don't take the time to put the foundations in place will find that they spend a lot of time going backwards. There are lots of opportunities emerging for brands to use their proprietary data to bring competitive advantage. We're seeing the really forward-looking organizations develop solutions that take advantage of fine-tuning open source models that enables them to tap into the model architecture without then having their data leak into the wider ecosystem. So they can take advantage of the model capabilities, but building their own proprietary solutions that take advantage of their own valuable IP. Fine-tuning models that take proprietary data about advertising content and metadata and performance data is what's enabling Monks to really drive significant improvements in return on advertising spend for their customers. I think sitting here in 5 years' time, I think we'll be having conversations about capabilities that we possibly can't yet imagine, but I do think that there will be definitely a backdrop of proven productivity and real business outcomes. We can already start to see it happening now, but it's kind of like the green shoots. I think in 5 years' time, the organizations that are successful and will be the ones that have made the investments that enable them to point to very, very specific examples of how AI has transformed their business. That's just the trend of going from pilot to production at scale. One of the things that separates companies that thrive from those that fall behind is a willingness to get started, even though all of the conditions might not be perfect. And I think one of those things is definitely data, because I think a lot of organizations see their data as a barrier. And this is one of the things that I've been really impressed that Monks have been promoting, is that the data that you've got is the data that you can get started with to build a system that's a flywheel that not only will deliver improved outcomes, but that will also improve the data. Because you're never going to have the perfect data, and the best time to start is now.
For those of you guys just joined us, I'm Anna Magzanian, president of LA Times Studios and Nank Games, and I'm really excited actually to be here to talk about this next topic. I know there's a lot of conversations about technology, branding, marketing, but we're going to talk about living a long time, and we're also going to talk about really making it count and living a healthy, valuable long time. It was funny because everybody's all about the longevity and the revolution of longevity. And for decades, it feels like wellness industry has been obsessed with lifespan, right? Like simply how many years can we live longer? But today, I feel like the consumer is flipping the script a little bit. They want a healthy life. They want to have the ability to live better, have more energy, mental clarity, vitality throughout the years. Longevity isn't a futuristic concept, but it's like the next major, I would say, consumer revolution. And at the center of it, and we've all heard about this, is NAD+. Anybody familiar with NAD and NAD+? Anybody on NAD or NAD+ right now? Anyone curious if they should do it? Great. So we're gonna cover a lot of myths today. And basically, NAD+ is rapidly moving out of biotech labs and straight into the mainstream, but in a very crowded, noisy wellness market. Like, how do brands really build trust and cut through the hype? To unpack this science with us, I'm incredibly honored to have Mona be with us today. Mona is the Global Director of Medical and Science Affairs at Niagen Bioscience. So, Mona, would you mind just introducing yourself in a sense of like, what do you do day to day?
Oh, well, thank you. It's just an honor to be here in France. It's nice and hot, lots of wine going around. So that I'll talk about metabolic stressors, and that will be something that I'll talk on. What I do is I take the science that our incredible science team creates, and we also have an external research program, and they do a lot of independent research. I take all of that data and I translate it so that the consumers can understand, as well as healthcare providers can actually apply it to their patients that come into their office. I wanted to mention something, though. You earlier said about longevity. That's a buzzword that we're hearing all the time about longevity. And I don't know, how many of you want to live a really long time but have a poor quality of life? Nobody raises their hand. How many want to live maybe a little bit shorter time but have a really high quality of life? That's what we're aiming for, and that's where NAD comes into play, because it's about health span, or adding quality to years versus extending the years of your life. Because right now we don't have data to even show that. There's one mouse study that I'm aware of that shows that we could potentially extend the life of a mouse, but okay, if it doesn't get caught into a trap first. But it's about the quality. And if you can optimize the cellular function, we'll talk a little bit about that later too, then you can enhance the quality of your life.
I want to talk about the elevator pitch, right? So like NAD+ actually is, what is it? And why is it critical to how we age?
So NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and we will say NAD moving forward. It's a molecule in the cell that's essential, and it's found in every cell. It has two primary functions. The first function is for ATP production. ATP is the energy currency of your body. Think about all the food that you've eaten here, even all the wine that you've consumed here. That all gets converted and used to create energy in the body. NAD is involved in that. It's one of its primary functions. The second function is cellular health and repair, and the DNA repair. So again, very technical terms for, okay, what's happening? As I mentioned, we're here, we might be consuming alcohol, we might be out here in the sun getting sunburn. All of that causes a metabolic stress. That causes damage to your cells. And NAD is involved in repairing that damage that happens. Over time, i.e. age, in conjunction with the metabolic stressors, NAD will fall. And it falls roughly 65% between 30 and 70. So when that happens, our cells cannot be optimized and function to the best of their abilities. So what we want to do is we want to maintain the optimization of the cellular function as long as possible. Mitochondria, I'm sure you've heard about the mitochondria, right? Powerhouse of the cell. That's what NAD is also involved in, is making sure that the mitochondria stay functioning as well as possible.
for brand builders in the room, so Niagen Bioscience has, from everything I've read, has really been pioneering sort of really translating the complexity of the science. Your job is not easy. I mean, scientists are doing the magic, but it's like half the time when scientists speak, you can't really understand what they're talking about. I want to know specifically within True Niagen and Niagen Plus, how you address these skyrocketing demands for cellular energy.
Well, what we do is so Niagen is an NAD precursor, and precursors are the building blocks to NAD. So think about amino acids being the building blocks to protein. So NAD precursor, most of them, actually all of them, are vitamin B3. They're different forms of that. So Niagen is a form of nicotinamide riboside. That is a form of vitamin B3. All of those will increase NAD in the cell inherently and naturally. It's the way your body does it. The only way, a little fun fact, the only way that you know that you might be deficient in NAD is if you have pellagra. So pellagra is the deficiency disease for niacin. And that means that you're not getting enough B3, so then NAD isn't being able to be produced. If NAD is not produced, the cell dies. There's that. So what we're doing at Niagen is that we are creating and helping support all the research that is going on within the NAD category. We have an external research program where we have well over 200 studies, 45 of which are human studies, and we provide material and placebo to these independent researchers, most of them are universities, NIH, et cetera, that will do the research to understand what is going on in the NAD system and NAD pathways in the body. So we want to lead the science, and we do that by providing and doing that external research and building awareness of NAD and the importance of NAD in cellular health. Nobody thinks about cells. We think about a muscle, we might think about our heart and
our skin.
Bones, our skin, yeah, we're all here absorbing that amazing humidity. But we don't think about where it actually takes place, and that's down at the cellular level. So if you cannot get to the cellular level and the mitochondria and everything else in there, then you're not supporting the cells, i.e. the tissue, i.e. the organ, i.e. the human, to the best of its ability.
I want to talk a little bit about branding. Thank you for that. But there's so much noise, right? The minute you search something with NAD, you are swiping up to every other ad, every like quick fix, or here's this new TikTok trend, etc. I want to know from a marketing and a brand perspective how your company sort of differentiates themselves. And then two, what does it take to tell the story? I mean, as far as like, can you share consumer insights? Can you share like case studies? What does it take for sort of cut through the noise from a marketing and branding perspective?
One of the things that we do at Niagen is we lead with science, and we lead with science. We make sure that science is the message. Now, it's breaking down that science in order for people to understand what is the benefit about, why do we care? And that's one of the things I think we need to tell the consumer is why do we care? I've been to research scientific conferences, and I'm sitting in the audience going, why do I care? So one of the things that I try to do my best is be able to apply it. So when I'm speaking at healthcare provider conferences, I'll take the science and I'll apply it to the best of our ability. Let me give you a little fun fact about some data on Niagen. So we have 7 studies that show that it decreases inflammatory markers. We know that inflammation is very important when it comes to an acute injury because it protects the body. But chronic inflammation over time, called inflammaging, causes and tends to lead to disease. So we have 7 studies that shows that it lowers those inflammatory markers. Here's an example. There's somebody that, one of our colleagues at work has a family member who had psoriasis, and we have some data on psoriasis. If any of you know what psoriasis is, it's very painful, and it has red patches on the skin. And he took some Niagen, and he actually decreased. You could see a dramatic change in the patches on his legs. And that's inflammation. So ultimately, psoriasis is inflammation. And so he took it, and it decreased that inflammation to make it more bearable for him to do that. So we're not claiming, I'm not going to say that we claim that we cure psoriasis, because that's a disease claim. We don't go there. But that is something with regard to how do you apply it? So how is this going to even help my my patients if you're a healthcare provider. If you're a consumer and you're reading the data or you're reading something on the website, well, what do I care about ATP? Nobody really may not know what that is. And what do I care about cellular health or cellular damage? They don't think about that until they have like an injury, i.e. this tape that I have on my leg, and they realize, oh, what can I do to support that other than stretch for me?
Right. But I mean, everybody understands inflammation. I mean, we've seen so much how inflammation can affect the human in so many ways. So the science from what you just said, so there's 7 studies done that the product actually decreases inflammation.
Inflammatory markers.
Inflammatory markers. So tell me more.
So you might understand, most people understand the word inflammation, but they don't understand what is going on in the body. And guaranteed that most people don't know they have chronic inflammation until it's too late. Because when it comes to like disease, it's kind of the chicken and the egg. It's like, is the disease and then it's inflammation, or is it inflammation and then disease? Most scientists are leaning toward it's inflammation, then going into that's causing the disease. So the important thing about understanding inflammation is you don't want to completely eliminate it because, as I mentioned, you need it in certain instances. Well, you want to manage it so that it's not being controlling in your life and it's not causing like irreversible harm and tissue damage. And that's where some of the studies that we've seen, some in healthy populations, some in disease populations, where we've seen that come down. And if you can manage some of those inflammatory markers, then you can, again, optimize cellular function and manage overall health and health span.
I want to know a little bit about what you guys are working on next. So any exciting breakthroughs, anything you can share with us, like what's coming up? I know, because you're a public company, correct? Yep. So I'd love to know, like, what should we be keeping our eyes on next in this whole health span era?
So about a year and a half ago, we launched Niagen Plus, which is our pharma-grade Niagen. So that's the one that we can do in IV and injection. We also just launched Niagen NanoCloud, which is our skin brand. And so we're looking into the research a little bit more into how can NAD precursors, specifically NR, support skin health. We know about the inflammation again and sunburn and all of that kind of stuff. But what about the stuff that we care about? Fine lines and wrinkles, aging skin. Because aging is an internal condition. It manifests externally. And it's at the point that we see the manifestation that we're like, I better do something about it. But it's not necessarily too late, but we could have started younger. It's always the aha moment you've had. Oh, I should have done this 20 years ago. So Niagen NanoCloud, we have a perception study where they use NanoCloud. They're these great little pillows that Niagen is protected because it's very water soluble, and so you can't do it. It'll break down if it's mixed with water or serums right away. But it's protected in this little pillow, and once you add a little water or serum or whatever, you can put it on your face. And then what people noticed in this perception study is that they noticed a smoother texture. They noticed hydration, and they noticed, some had some changes in fine lines. So we're going to do some more data on that and looking into some more research on that. We're excited about that.
I'm really excited about this. I mean, I feel like more and more everyone's taking their health into their own hands. Like you see things like Function Health, you see Prenuvo happening in the marketplace, and they're not waiting for things to go really wrong. They want to step ahead of it. Who exactly would you say is the NAD Plus audience today? Should we start super early? Should we wait till in their mid-30s? Should I wait till I'm 50 and I notice a wrinkle and I'm worried about it, or something hurts? I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
It all depends on somebody's lifestyle. As I mentioned earlier, NAD will fall not only with time, but also with exposure to different metabolic stressors. Like sunburn, alcohol, poor diet. But the other one is like overtraining. And overtraining to the point where you cannot recover for your next exercise or workout routine. It's not a hard CrossFit class. That is not overtraining. Think 2-a-days in football. So when that happens, it causes significant stress on the body. Again, cellular damage that may not be able to be repaired. So if somebody is an athlete, for instance, especially pro or semi-pro, it's recommended to start supporting the NAD system at that time. If somebody is really sedentary, unfortunately, that also decreases NAD. So you have both sides of the continuum there. What I mentioned earlier about the decline in NAD is 65% between 30 and 70. So ideally, we suggest start it around in your 30s, again, depending upon a lot of the stressors. Many of you traveled over here from the States. That's a long plane ride. There's dehydration on the plane. There's all the things that's on the plane. So you're likely going to be depleted in NAD. So if you have that kind of extensive travel, and guaranteed there's a lot of us that are probably partaking in some of the festivities that are going on, the beach, the alcohol, all of the food, all of the fun stuff. So it's really kind of individualized, and individualized health in sense of like even nutrition is growing. Like in the last 5 years, especially since COVID, people did start taking control of their health and their life because they're like, I'm done with traditional healthcare, so I want to take control and I want to be in the driver's seat. And the infusion clinics have popped up all over the place, so people are really understanding the benefits of getting some, not only Niagen, but other types of nutrients and taking care of their health. So that 30-ish age, that's a good kind of starting point. If you're really active, if you have family members who are really active, then perhaps a little bit before.
Interesting. Is it ever too late to start?
No. Better late than never.
Better late than never. No, that's fair. Cellular health also isn't like an overnight fix. I've heard like it's preventative. I've heard it's long-term care. How do you keep consumers engaged and build a lifelong loyalty when a product is about prevention rather than visible transformation?
That's a great question, because with Niagen, many times you cannot feel the change because how many of you take omega-3s or vitamin D? Pretty much everybody. Do you feel it? No. But you trust the science, right? You trust it. You read about it. You trust the unbiased science that's out there. And that's what we do at Niagen is we put the science out there. We make sure that it's unbiased. It's published regardless of the outcome. So you'll always see both sides of the story. And by doing that, that builds credibility. And by continually doing that, that will build credibility. And you never know. This is one thing with prevention. You never know what you're preventing because it's, how are you going to know? You're not. We did a really fun survey with our True Niagen users who were using Niagen for a year or more continuously, and we saw that they reported that they felt healthier and they felt like they had less diagnoses, et cetera. And many of them talk about a change in their energy level, a change in the way that they feel. A lot of that is very, very subtle. So keep an eye on like your very subtle changes, sleeping changes, all of that before you start and then after you start. Oh, and if you have a wearable, the Oura rings, take a look at that. You can look at HRV. We don't have data on this, but it's a way that you can track something, especially performance. So take a look at all of your information on Oura Ring and see if any of that changes before starting and then after starting.
Yeah, I've got the Whoop.
Oh, the Whoop. Yeah, that's another one.
Live off of it. Well, thank you very much. We actually have a couple of minutes for some questions for Mona. And please, yes, sir. I'm going to give you my microphone so everyone can hear your question.
This is very insightful. Thank you very much. We are in Cannes, which is about winning consumers, and I'm really searching for your perspective in the business where you play. Some big high-spend companies in supplements fail versus performance on company like yours. For example, if I look at the U.S. results, I mean the big companies actually perform quite lousy, I would say. Why do you think, despite all the resources that they have, why do you think that the companies like yours outperform bigger players in supplements in the US?
Did you say compounders?
No. Why do you think your company outperforms the bigger players that there are out there, correct?
Science. I just have to keep going back to the science because we have the science on our ingredients. And if you take a look at the data, if you look at a specific research study, it'll show you what ingredient was used as treatment and as placebo. And if it doesn't state, like for us, it would state Niagen. If it doesn't state that, then they're using it off-brand. Who knows what it is? And quite frankly, they're infringing upon patents if they're doing that. But that is where I believe that we're differentiating ourselves from the bigger players that are out there. Not to mention we have over 60 patents on Niagen, nicotinamide riboside chloride, so that's the other one too.
Amazing, thank you. Yes, hold on one sec. I'm gonna bring my.
Hi, you said the analogy with vitamin D and omega-3, and yes, I trust science, and then I test that on the lab. Can NAD be tested as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So she asked if NAD can be tested, and NAD can be tested in the blood by a finger stick, which is the least invasive. It could also be venous draw, and then it has to be sent out to a special lab if it's venous draw, because there's only certain labs that do that test. And that's the only other way to test NAD is in the tissue level, which you have to do a biopsy. So you can do a muscle biopsy, and that's kind of painful. And I don't think anybody wants to donate liver or heart to test the tissues there. I don't want to do that. We test that in animals, obviously. So you can do an NAD test by dry blood spot and see. And blood NAD is really a unique kind of beast in a sense, because as I mentioned, NAD is found in every single cell in the body, including all the blood. And all the blood needs it to survive, just as all the tissues need it to survive. And there was a study that came out a few months back saying that blood NAD remains stable, therefore it's not a sign of aging, and it shouldn't be used as a biological marker of aging. But what that study didn't say was that it's one of several markers that will measure aging. There are an infinite number of different markers to measure aging, and this is one of them. There's also data to show that blood NAD does fall, and they didn't mention any of those studies. And there's also data in tissues to show that NAD will fall with age. And again, it's not just time that decreases NAD, it is time and metabolic stress. You also have to think about NAD being an extremely fluid molecule because it's consumed and produced all at the same time. So if you're going through a little high amount of these metabolic stressors that we talked about, just travel in general, then it's going to be probably overconsumed and not enough produced. And as we get older, our ability to produce and maintain and kind of keep up with that ratio lowers. So that's why the supplement comes into play, because as we age, then we want to boost it up a little bit and give our body a little helping hand. Same thing with vitamin D. We're all wearing sunscreen, maybe. And if you are, you're not going to produce vitamin D. That's why supplements come into play. Unless you live in Alaska, too. You definitely need those.
Amazing.
There's some tests that are dry blood spot tests that you can get online to measure it. And what I would recommend, if you do that, then you would do it before you supplement, and then roughly you could do 2 weeks and then 4 weeks again, because in that month, especially on Niagen, we have data showing 2 weeks of supplementation, depending on the dose, will increase 50 to 150% in blood NAD. Then that's just a great marker. Then the other marker that you can use, as I mentioned, the wearables. We don't have data to show that, but it's just an interesting, you can see the changes. And it's something that you might be used to. And if the only thing you change is by adding a supplement like Niagen, then you know that it's the Niagen that's doing it. So blood NAD is a definite marker of exposure for any kind of a supplement that you take for NAD precursors. And it's a way just to see where you're at and what you're doing. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what they did in that study.
Thank you, everybody. Another round of applause for Mona for being here today. And thanks for being here. Thank you. And thank you, Monks.